Two juicy-caked female prisoners had been joking with each other, deliberately trying to tease our dumb, disgusting gooner, prison officer Woojin. When Woojin noticed them, he told them to stop immediately. However, instead of listening, the girls began mocking him, calling him a loser, and claiming that he could not even approach them properly. One of them continued to provoke him even further, intensifying the teasing. In the middle of this situation, Lady Sergeant Na Chan-mi called out to Woojin and asked him to come speak with her. He responded that he would, and immediately went over, appearing visibly nervous and panicked. As they walked toward the security office, some of the other prison officers were seen whispering among themselves, commenting that Woojin was about to be scolded again, and that he never seemed to have any peace. Chan-mi began reprimanding Woojin harshly, telling him that he was incapable of handling even a simple situation, as the prisoners were fooling around while he stood by. She criticized him for calling himself a prison officer despite his lack of control, reminding him that she had already warned him that such behavior would only encourage prisoners to take advantage of his weakness. She even added that a male student assigned to a girls' high school would appear more intimidating than him. Woojin stood there feeling deeply embarrassed and assured her that he would take extra care in the future. Chan-mi responded that she was choosing to trust him once again, although she admitted she did not understand why she kept giving him chances. She then stepped closer to him and instructed him to do his job properly and straighten his posture. Woojin felt surprised and slightly confused by her physical proximity, as he could not understand why she had touched his chest while correcting his stance. After that, Chan-mi told him to go to the warden's office, explaining that the warden required extra assistance. Woojin agreed, saluted her, and left for the office. As he walked away, Chan-mi remained standing there, thinking to herself that although his expressions and actions appeared naive, his physique was undeniably well built. When Woojin reached outside the warden's office, he could clearly hear that the warden was conducting a workout session with a female prisoner. He felt a moment of excitement observing the situation but decided to ignore it and entered the office. Inside, the female prisoner was sitting in a way that made her outfit quite noticeable. The warden instructed Woojin to return her to her cell once he was finished. He then asked Woojin whether he could drive, adding that he would need to keep his Saturday free because he was planning to go on a date with that same prisoner. This surprised Woojin slightly, but he agreed nonetheless. 2 days later, several more female prisoners arrived at the facility. Woojin and his colleague were standing together discussing the situation. His colleague remarked that the warden was a strange and reckless man for bringing female prisoners into his office like that. Woojin advised him not to spread such comments, but the colleague dismissed the concern, saying that he was simply jealous and that the warden had too much authority for anyone to question him. As they continued talking, they noticed that new prisoners were arriving. One particular girl caught their attention, and the colleague commented on how beautiful she looked. Woojin also found himself staring at her, unable to take his eyes off her beauty. His colleague began teasing him about it, but suddenly Chan-mi appeared from behind them and shouted at both of them to return to their posts immediately. Startled, they quickly ran back to their positions, while Chan-mi remained there, observing the same girl with a serious expression. All of the newly arrived prisoners were then formally received by Chan-mi. She introduced herself as the chief officer of Chongyun Women's Correctional Facility and informed them that a body search would be conducted to ensure that none of them were carrying any prohibited items, emphasizing that it was necessary for overall safety. She then ordered them to remove their clothing, and the prisoners began complying. Among them was the same strikingly beautiful woman. Once the search was completed, Chan-mi called her out specifically, stating that she appeared suspicious and might be hiding something. She ordered the woman to turn around and face the wall. However, the woman refused to comply and argued that she had already been searched earlier by another correctional officer. She insisted that this was no longer a legitimate search but a violation of her human rights, and she demanded that any further search be conducted properly, in private, and with the appropriate procedures. This response frustrated Chan-mi greatly, as she perceived the woman as arrogant and uncooperative. Chan-mi stated that the situation could have been handled easily if the prisoner had cooperated, but now she had left her with no choice. She then called for Woojin and instructed him to enter the room. Woojin, along with other security officers, stepped inside, and all of them were visibly surprised by the atmosphere and the scene before them. Woojin initially assumed that Chan-mi would conduct the inspection individually and in a more controlled manner, but instead, it was being carried out in a group setting. The prisoner who had been suspected began crying and stated that she was willing to undergo further inspection, but she requested that all the male officers be sent to the room before anything continued. After this, Woojin was sitting outside with his colleagues. One of them suggested that they might have to remain on standby until Sergeant Chan-mi gave further instructions. Meanwhile, Woojin found himself distracted, thinking about the beauty of the woman he had seen earlier inside the room. At the same time, a thought crossed his mind that perhaps Chanmi was behaving in an unusual or excessive way during the inspection. During the ongoing inspection, the situation escalated when the suspected prisoner suddenly slapped Chanmi, as she felt that Chanmi had crossed her limits during the physical checking. The other prisoners also began to feel that Chanmi was overreacting and acting unjustly. This quickly led to chaos, as several prisoners intervened, attempting to protect the girl from what they perceived as unfair treatment. Within moments, the situation turned violent, and the group of prisoners began attacking Chanmi. Hearing the commotion, Woojin and the other officers rushed inside. One of the correctional officers ordered Woojin to regain control of the situation and restrain all the prisoners again. Woojin immediately moved to restrain the same prisoner who had caused the disturbance, but she resisted and refused to cooperate. At that moment, Chanmi came from behind and struck the prisoner on the back of her head with force, causing her to lose consciousness instantly. The unconscious prisoner was then taken to the hospital, where Woojin was assigned to watch over her. When she regained consciousness, Woojin asked if she was all right, explaining that she had received first aid for her head injury and that the doctors had said it was not serious. He also told her that she could rest there if needed. However, she remained silent. Woojin then attempted to bring up the earlier physical altercation, saying that he wanted to talk about what had happened. The prisoner refused to engage in the conversation and stated firmly that she did not want to think about it or discuss it with any of them. She added that, to her, he and Chanmi were no different, that they were all the same. This response left Woojin visibly surprised. Respecting her unwillingness to talk, Woojin told her that he would send another guard in his place and quietly left the room. As he walked away, he reflected on the situation, thinking that his first impression on her had been terrible and that nothing was going according to his expectations. While making his way through the facility, Woojin noticed something unusual. He saw that 2 female prisoners had been allowed out of their cells by a correctional officer in order to take a shower. This surprised him, as he believed it was already past lockup time, and prisoners were not normally permitted to leave their cells or bathe at that hour. He found himself confused about what exactly was happening inside the facility. Meanwhile, inside the shower room, 2 prisoners, Hee-young and Junye, were taking a shower together. During their conversation, Junye mentioned that she had also wanted to get a massage. In response, Hee-young began giving her a body massage while they continued talking about the events of the day. Hee-young commented that Junye had handled her interaction with the warden quite well. Junye responded casually, implying that her influence came from providing money and younger girls to him. As they continued their conversation, they brought up the incident involving the new prisoner who had slapped Chanmi during the inspection. After hearing about it in detail, Junye expressed interest in the new prisoner, stating that she found her actions intriguing. She then remarked thoughtfully that perhaps she should have kept that girl under her control or, alternatively, left her alone to act freely. In the punishment room area of the Cheongyun Female Correctional Facility, a newly admitted female inmate remained confined, left alone in an environment that felt suffocatingly hot and oppressive. The air itself seemed heavy, clinging to her skin in a way that made it difficult to stay still. As she stood there, discomfort gradually turned into frustration. Her gaze shifted toward the bathroom area, but the thought of using it only made her feel more repulsed. The conditions were far from tolerable, and after a brief moment of hesitation, she began contemplating relieving herself in a corner instead, convincing herself that it might be the only bearable option in such circumstances. Just as she was about to act on that decision, she was abruptly interrupted by the presence of an officer who approached her from behind. His voice carried a knowing tone as he remarked that he was aware of what she had been about to do. Without waiting for a response, he continued, commenting that a place as rough and degrading as this was no environment for someone as beautiful as her. His words were laced with an unsettling familiarity, as though he were attempting to soften the situation while simultaneously crossing an unspoken boundary. He went on to suggest that if anything was bothering her, she could confide in him, presenting himself as someone willing to help. Before leaving, he casually added that he would see her later, as though this brief interaction had established some kind of understanding between them. His sudden departure left the inmate standing in silence, caught between confusion and discomfort. She found herself taken aback, not by the content of his words alone, but by the tone and intention behind them. In her thoughts, she dismissed his behavior as deeply pathetic, recognizing the insincerity beneath his approach. Almost instinctively, her mind drifted to Woojin. In comparison, she reflected that he had at least shown a form of genuine friendliness toward her. Even though she had struggled to speak openly with him and had found it difficult to express herself in his presence, there had been a certain sincerity in his demeanor. The contrast made her realize that the officer who had just approached her carried none of that authenticity. Instead, she concluded that he was likely the type to casually flirt with every female inmate, treating them all in the same superficial manner. Her thoughts were abruptly cut short when Chanmi entered the area. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Chanmi's presence carried authority, and without hesitation, she directed her attention toward the officer. Her voice rose sharply as she reprimanded him, making it clear that he was not permitted to be there. She warned him that if he were found in that area again, he could face termination, emphasizing that it was a restricted section designated as a male prohibited zone. Faced with her stern warning, the officer had no choice but to leave, his earlier confidence replaced by a quick and silent retreat. Once he was gone, Chanmi turned her attention to the new inmate. Her tone, though still firm, was more controlled, as she informed the girl that her detention period in that area had come to an end. She stated that a room had been assigned to her and that she would be moved accordingly. The announcement marked a shift in the inmate's situation, though the weight of the environment still lingered. As Chanmi stood there, her mind involuntarily drifted back to an incident that had taken place 2 hours earlier. She recalled being summoned by the warden, a call that had immediately placed her on edge. When she arrived at his office, she found herself under scrutiny as he questioned her about whether she had encountered any difficulties during the body inspections of the prisoners. The setting itself had felt tense, and her awareness sharpened when she noticed that Junye was seated behind the warden, silently observing. Junye soon broke that silence, speaking in a tone that carried subtle mockery. She implied that rumors regarding the incident had already spread throughout the prison, her words suggesting that the situation had become a subject of widespread discussion. She commented on Chanmi's expression, remarking that the inmates had seemingly managed to make a fool out of her. Her delivery was layered with condescension, as she continued to make light of Chanmi's position in a way that blurred the line between observation and ridicule. The warden then addressed Chanmi directly, shifting the focus of the conversation back to her actions. He stated that although she had been granted permission to conduct thorough body searches, she had exceeded her authority by inspecting areas that were explicitly off-limits, particularly the inmate's South Region no-no areas. His tone was firm, leaving little room for justification. Chanmi responded by questioning the logic behind the situation. She argued that it made no sense for an inmate to be brought in without proper authorization and then be treated with an unusual level of leniency, as though they were being afforded privileges that contradicted the institution's rules. She insisted that the inmate in question should be immediately returned to her designated room, emphasizing that the circumstances did not align with standard procedure. The warden, however, was not receptive to her argument. He pointed out that the discussion was meant to address her misconduct, not to shift attention onto others. He further remarked that her tendency to bring up unrelated matters only reflected poorly on her ability to handle inmates in a logical and disciplined manner. His words carried a sense of finality, reinforcing the hierarchy that governed their roles. At that moment, Junye interjected once again, stating that it would be inappropriate for her to remain present during the ongoing discussion. She announced that she would take her leave, maintaining a composed demeanor. Before leaving, she reminded the warden of a request she had previously made, subtly reinforcing her own position within the dynamic. The warden acknowledged her reminder, assuring her that it had not been forgotten. As Junye prepared to exit, she remarked that she would be leaving now that she had been informed of the situation. However, before fully stepping out, she turned her gaze toward Chanmi. With a faintly condescending expression, she told her to take care of herself, adding that she already appeared to be in a rather miserable state. Her words lingered in the air even after she had left, leaving behind a trace of quiet provocation. The remark struck a nerve, and Chanmi found herself growing increasingly frustrated. Once Junye was gone, the warden resumed speaking, his tone carrying a more serious weight. He explained that, although the facility was located in a remote countryside area and remained largely outside public scrutiny, any exposure of such incidents could lead to significant consequences. He warned that if the situation were to become public, it could result in Chanmi losing not only her position but everything associated with it, including her uniform and authority. Hearing this, Chanmi acknowledged her mistake and apologized, admitting that she might have conducted an excessively invasive body search. Despite this, she remained firm in her stance, arguing that it was unacceptable to simply overlook the actions of an inmate who had gone as far as assaulting a warden. The warden went on to state that the situation was, in his view, a shared fault. He told Chanmi that she should put the matter aside for the time being and proceed by releasing Lee Boyun from the current restriction, adding that Boyun was to be transferred to Junye's room. His tone suggested that the decision had already been made and was not open for further debate. Chanmi reacted with visible frustration. She questioned the reasoning behind the order, expressing that she could not understand why Boyun was being released after only a few days. At the same time, she made it clear that she found no justification for placing her in Junye's quarters. To her, the decision seemed inconsistent with the rules they were supposed to follow. The warden responded by explaining that Boyun required close observation and that keeping her near Junye would serve that purpose effectively. He implied that the arrangement would be strategically beneficial. However, Chanmi pushed back, arguing that it was against protocol to place one inmate under the supervision or proximity of another. She emphasized that Boyun had already been marked for special observation and that such a decision contradicted standard procedure. In response, the warden revealed more about Boyun's background. He stated that Chanmi did not fully understand how Boyun had ended up in the prison. According to him, Boyun had once been a well-known news anchor, recognized for her tendency to expose and provoke trouble wherever she went. He mentioned that a colleague of his had once been caught in one of her investigations, which had led to a public photo lineup and significant humiliation. He added that, after repeatedly targeting influential individuals from the upper class, Boyun had ultimately found herself imprisoned. Concluding his explanation, he remarked that he had a particular approach in mind for handling her, one that involved using Junye, and instructed Chanmi to cooperate with this plan. Although still dissatisfied, Chanmi stated that she would comply with the order. However, she made it clear that if another incident similar to the previous one occurred, she would not hesitate to enforce appropriate punishment strictly according to the rules. The warden acknowledged her statement, though his response carried a sense of dismissal. He remarked that she should indeed follow procedure when necessary, but added that she had already exhausted his patience. With that, he told her she was free to leave. Following the meeting, Chanmi found herself standing before Boyun, preparing to escort her to Junye's room. As she led her down the corridor, her thoughts remained unsettled. She reminded herself that regardless of Boyun's past, as a prominent newscaster, or her former status, she was now simply an inmate within the facility. At the same time, Chanmi found herself thinking that it was only a matter of time before Boyun made a mistake. She resolved that once that happened, she would not hesitate to send her back to the punishment room. Her thoughts also turned to the chief warden, and she concluded with quiet irritation that he was entirely under Junye's influence, making any attempt to argue with him largely pointless. After some time, they arrived outside the designated cell block. Chanmi handed Boyun over, and she was sent inside, where several other inmates were already present. The atmosphere inside the room was tense yet watchful, as the others immediately took notice of the newcomer. One of the inmates asked Boyun to introduce herself. She began by stating her name and age, identifying herself as Boyun and mentioning that she was 26 years old. However, before she could continue, Junye interrupted her. Junye dismissed the formal introduction as unnecessary and uninteresting. Instead, she remarked that she had already heard about Boyun's encounter with Chanmi and demanded that she share the details of that experience. The sudden shift in topic embarrassed Boyun, making her visibly uncomfortable. She responded that she did not wish to discuss that particular incident in detail. Despite this, Junye persisted, insisting that everyone in the cell was like family and that there was no reason for her to hold back or act reserved. Hee-young joined the conversation, attempting to frame the situation differently. She stated that just because Sergeant Na had treated Boyun harshly did not mean that everyone else in the room was the same. Her tone suggested a mix of reassurance and expectation, as though she were encouraging Boyun to open up. Before the situation could settle, another inmate suddenly stepped forward and struck Boyun with a punch. The action was abrupt and unprovoked. The attacker then remarked that Boyun could not even defend herself against such a simple blow, reinforcing the hostile environment surrounding her. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the facility, Woojin was standing with another security officer. The officer questioned his presence, pointing out that Woojin had been scheduled to be off duty that day. In response, Woojin recalled that the warden had asked him to adjust his schedule for the weekend, as he had personal plans involving a meeting with an inmate. Rather than explaining everything in detail, Woojin simply informed the other officer that there was a special visitor for someone in cell number 6. Shortly afterward, Woojin made his way to that very cell. As he entered, his intention was merely to inform the inmates about the visitor. However, the moment he stepped inside, he was met with an unexpected and unsettling sight. Boyun was lying on the ground, her condition visibly distressed and weakened. The scene immediately caught him off guard, leaving him both surprised and shocked at what he was witnessing. Junye addressed Woojin in a calm yet dismissive manner, telling him that there was no need for concern regarding Boyun. She casually remarked that Boyun was merely experiencing a stomachache, downplaying the situation as insignificant. At the same time, Security Officer Mr. Ko was also present in the room, observing the interaction. Nearby, Yunhai approached Mr. Ko with visible excitement, asking whether her mother had come to visit her. Her tone carried anticipation, as though she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Junye responded to her enthusiasm by commenting that it was a good thing her mother had come to see her. Following that, Mr. Ko turned to Woojin and stated that he would handle Boyun's situation himself. He then instructed Woojin to escort Yoonhee to the visitation room. Eunhye left alongside the assigned officers, her earlier excitement still evident. Meanwhile, Boyun, despite her condition, found herself caught in conflicting thoughts. She began to feel as though she had somehow become the center of attention, yet at the same time, a deep sense of isolation weighed on her. In her mind, she wondered if Woojin might be the only person in the facility who could potentially help her. The realization that she was completely alone in the prison only intensified that feeling. The inmate who had previously struck Boyun was identified as Myung-soon. Junye instructed her to take Boyun to the bathroom and keep an eye on her, adding that Boyun would now be staying in their area from that point onward. The order was delivered with quiet authority, leaving no room for disagreement. On the other side of the facility, Woojin escorted Eunhye to meet the warden. Yoonhee expressed her excitement openly, remarking that she felt special being treated as a guest of the warden. Her words reflected a strange mix of innocence and misplaced enthusiasm. As she walked, Yoonhee recalled an incident from 30 minutes earlier. She had opened a cupboard inside the office and discovered that it was filled with luxurious clothes and expensive shoes. The sight had surprised her, and she had found herself thinking that she had never realized the warden kept such items hidden away in his office. At the same time, the warden was speaking with Soojin. He explained that he would normally accompany Soojin on his leave for the day, but he had been unexpectedly summoned by the director. Because of this, he instructed a subordinate officer to keep Eunhye restrained in handcuffs and drive her around the area for a few hours. He emphasized that he was entrusting this responsibility because of the officer's hard work. Shortly after, Yoonhee appeared before the warden, dressed in the luxurious clothes she had found earlier. She asked him how she looked, clearly seeking validation. The warden responded critically, stating that her skirt was too short and questioning whether she was trying to impress someone. In reaction, Yoonhee raised her voice at him, pointing out that the clothes had come from his own collection and remarking that she would wear them again for him next time. She then broke into laughter, treating the exchange lightly. Meanwhile, Woojin found his thoughts drifting back to Boyun. He reflected on how he had been constantly worried about her, even though she had previously made it clear that she did not want to talk to anyone. He tried to reason with himself, reminding himself that he could not show special treatment to any inmate and that Boyun herself seemed uncomfortable around him. He attempted to convince himself that he should remain detached. However, the memory of her fragile and miserable condition lingered in his mind, making it difficult for him to fully ignore his concern. He questioned how he could simply stop caring after seeing the way she had looked at him. As these thoughts occupied him, Yoonhee, who was seated beside him in the vehicle, suddenly broke the silence. She remarked that she had not been able to see him clearly the last time because of the angle, but now she noticed his features. She commented that he looked kind, with striking eyes and a sharp nose, and even went as far as to call him handsome. Woojin responded with a brief and polite expression of thanks, though internally he found her behavior inappropriate. He recalled how she had acted in the warden's office earlier and thought that she seemed to have no sense of restraint. He then asked her whether the handcuffs were causing her discomfort. Yoonhee replied that she would manage, adding that this was her first time being taken outside in an entire year. She then introduced herself formally, saying that her name was Eunhee, and suggesting that he could call her by that name while they were outside the facility. Woojin found her behavior increasingly strange, especially as he remembered that she had winked at him earlier. To him, it felt as though she was behaving recklessly, almost as if she were intoxicated. When Woojin did not respond to her advances, Eunhee became irritated and raised her voice, accusing him of ignoring her. The tension between them lingered as they continued driving. Suddenly, a deer appeared on the road, forcing Woojin to react quickly. The situation nearly resulted in an accident, but he managed to regain control of the vehicle just in time, preventing a crash. After the sudden stop, Woojin apologized, explaining that he had tried to steady her so that she would not be thrown around inside the car. Yoonhee, caught off guard by the incident, became visibly embarrassed. She admitted that the situation had startled her and then stated that she needed to use the restroom. Woojin agreed, and they stopped near a secluded area with bushes. He told her that he would step back to give her privacy and that she could call him if she needed anything. However, Yoonhee complained that the restraints were making it difficult for her to manage. She asked him to help her adjust her clothing so she could take care of herself. Woojin hesitated but ultimately agreed to assist within limits. Afterward, Yoonhee shifted her tone once again and looked at him with a different expression, suggesting that she wanted to do a workout session with him. Despite the unusual request, Woojin began going along with it in a controlled manner, attempting to keep the situation from escalating further. In the middle of this, Woojin suddenly received a call from Chanmi. Even through the call, he could sense her agitation, almost as if he could hear her shouting. He immediately asked Unya to stop what she was doing so he could attend to the call. However, Eunhye became frustrated at being interrupted and insisted that he continue the activity, refusing to let the moment end so easily. On the other side, Chanmi repeatedly attempted to contact Woojin, dialing his number again and again. However, each call went unanswered. As time passed, her frustration steadily grew. She began thinking that it was unacceptable for him to be unreachable, especially after having gone out alone with an inmate. The situation only intensified her irritation, and she resolved internally that she would make him answer for everything that had happened. Meanwhile, Woojin had finished the workout session with Eunhye. The physical activity had left him feeling unusually relaxed, as though the tension he had been carrying earlier had momentarily eased. By the time evening arrived, the two of them had returned to the facility. As they approached the building, Eunhye asked whether the sergeant was upstairs. Woojin responded that he had been informed that the sergeant was currently having dinner with the director. Hearing this, Eunhye made a suggestion in a light, almost playful tone. She asked Woojin to erase the dashcam footage from the vehicle, implying that it would prevent any potential trouble or scrutiny regarding their outing. The idea, though inappropriate, was presented casually, and it led to both of them sharing a brief moment of laughter, as though they were mutually aware of the risk, yet choosing to dismiss it. As they entered the prison building, Eunhye had already changed back into her standard prison uniform. She stepped out, expressing a sense of comfort in the familiar clothing, remarking that she actually felt at ease wearing it again. Reflecting on her experience, she commented that her first outing in a long time had been surprisingly enjoyable. Woojin, still influenced by the earlier interaction, remarked somewhat awkwardly that there might be another opportunity in the future to repeat the workout session they had shared. The moment he said it, he appeared slightly embarrassed, as if realizing how his words might be interpreted. Eunhye immediately picked up on this and responded with a teasing tone, suggesting that he seemed eager for such an opportunity. She went further, adding that she preferred having such interactions with him rather than with the warden, who, as she pointed out, was older than her father. Woojin quickly tried to correct himself, stating that he had not meant it in that way. However, Eunhye continued, shifting her tone to something more dramatic. She remarked that she had thought they were growing closer, but it now seemed as though he would be just as comfortable spending time with someone else. She described this realization as disappointing, creating a moment of tension between them. Caught off guard, Woojin began apologizing, unsure of how to properly respond. Almost immediately, Eunhye broke into laughter, revealing that she had only been teasing him. She reassured him not to misunderstand her intentions, stating clearly that she had no genuine interest in forming a relationship with him. However, she admitted that her meeting with the warden had given her the chance to encounter Woojin, and for that, she was grateful. She added, somewhat playfully, that she hoped he would not mind her having a small crush on him. Without warning, she leaned forward and kissed him. The moment was sudden and unexpected, leaving Woojin momentarily stunned. At that very instant, Chanmi entered the office. Her gaze immediately fell upon Woojin, and her expression carried a sharp, sarcastic edge. Addressing him coldly, she remarked that he had ignored her calls throughout the entire day, all because he had been alone with an inmate. Her words carried both accusation and controlled anger, signaling that the situation was far from over. Chanmi began questioning Woojin and Eunhye in an irritated and sharply interrogative manner, her tone suggesting suspicion as she demanded to know whether they had been doing something specific or out of the ordinary. The atmosphere immediately grew tense under her questioning. Eunhye responded quickly, explaining that there had simply been a loose strand on Woojin's shoulder and that she had removed it without hesitation or any deeper intention. Her explanation was direct, as if trying to avoid further misunderstanding. Chanmi then shifted her attention toward Woojin, asking him to confirm whether Eunhye's statement was accurate. Woojin agreed with her explanation, but internally he became uneasy, silently hoping that Chanmi had not misinterpreted the situation or possibly noticed anything that could resemble something more, such as a kiss or inappropriate interaction. After confirming the situation, Chanmi ordered another security officer, Jisoo, to escort inmate Eunhye back to her room. Jisoo complied, and Eunhye was taken away from the area, leaving a heavy and uncomfortable silence behind. However, the moment Eunhye was no longer present, Chanmi's restrained frustration erupted. Without warning, She stepped forward and slapped Woojin across the face with considerable force. The sound and impact immediately intensified the already tense atmosphere. Chanmi then began speaking in a raised and angry tone, telling him that although he might consider her foolish, she was not ignorant and could clearly see what was happening in front of her. She criticized his explanation about the loose strand, implying that it was a weak excuse and unacceptable behavior. Chanmi further scolded him for appearing vulnerable in front of inmates and accused him of disregarding her instructions. According to her, he had completely ignored her expectations and continued behaving in a way that she perceived as mocking or disrespectful. She went on to question his professionalism, directly challenging his identity as a correctional officer. Woojin remained silent throughout her outburst, standing still while visibly struggling with frustration and restraint. His expression reflected a mixture of anger and disbelief as he absorbed her accusations without responding immediately. Chanmi, however, did not stop there. She continued shouting at him, escalating her accusations further. She claimed that Woojin and Eunhye had been spending time together outside and referenced the workout session they had previously done together. These repeated allegations added to Woojin's emotional strain, pushing him further into frustration. Eventually, unable to contain himself any longer, Woojin shouted back at her to stop speaking. The sudden outburst marked the breaking point of his restraint. Soon after, Woojin declared that he would be quitting his position. This statement caused Chanmi to react with surprise once again, as she had not anticipated such a decision in the heat of the argument. Woojin then explained that since she believed he did not deserve to remain a correctional officer, he would formally submit his resignation on Monday. A few days passed, and Monday eventually arrived. The routine at the facility continued, with inmates being escorted to the shower area as part of their schedule. Eunhye was among them and was taking a shower at that time. While bathing, she found herself recalling the workout session she had previously shared with Woojin and internally reflected on how reckless or unusual the situation had been, almost as if it were something surreal in hindsight. At that moment, Hee-young and Myung-sun suddenly appeared and approached Eunhye. Their presence immediately shifted the mood again. They began confronting her, questioning how she had managed to influence or pressure Choi Junye into allowing her an extended outing. They insisted that what had happened was not simply an ordinary visit and accused her of attempting to deceive others. Their tone suggested disbelief and suspicion, as if they were trying to expose something hidden behind her explanation. Eunhye responded firmly but calmly, denying all accusations. She explained that she had received proper permission from the warden and had only met her parents at an officially arranged and approved location where they had shared a meal together. She expressed confusion over why they were associating her visit with threats or manipulation and questioned the logic behind their claims. She further implied that if anyone was skilled at such intimidation or pressure, it would be them, which noticeably irritated Hee-young. Myung-sun also joined in, questioning Eunhye's recent behavior and suggesting that she might be becoming reckless or careless with her words. She then threatened Eunhye directly, warning her that if she continued speaking in that manner, she would physically harm her. This aggressive remark caused Eunhye to become visibly frightened. Hee-young then raised her voice again, scolding Eunhye and instructing her to behave properly within the facility's hierarchy. She reminded her that when Lee Bo-yoon arrived, she should strictly stay within her limits, emphasizing her lower rank and position within the structure. Meanwhile, Bo-yoon was also in the shower area on the other side, quietly observing the environment. She internally thought that the inmates were unusually loud again, as their voices and arguments carried through the space. Nearby, another female prisoner stood beside her and commented on the situation, remarking that the inmates seemed to have an abundance of energy, likely due to their youth. She then turned toward Bo-yoon and pointed out that Bo-yoon herself was only 20 years old, while she, the speaker, was the oldest inmate present in the facility. Bo-yoon reacted to this comment with a faint smirk, not openly responding but acknowledging it internally. The setting was identified as Cheongyun Women Correctional Facility, Section 2, Room 6. Within this room, 6 inmates lived together under strict hierarchy and control. At the top of this structure was Choi Junye, who held the position of the room leader and was considered the most authoritative figure, effectively acting under the warden's influence. She was ranked number 1. Kang Myung-sun held the second rank, followed by Jo Hee-young at rank 3. Park Eun-hye, being the youngest among them, held rank 4. Kim Yeon-jung held rank 5 and was the oldest inmate in the room. Despite her generally friendly and gentle attitude toward Bo-yoon, there remained an unsettling feeling about her presence that Bo-yoon could not fully ignore. The reason for this unease was that Yeon-jung was a death row inmate sentenced to execution. This fact made Bo-yoon question her presence among them, as she could not fully understand why someone with such a sentence was placed in the same environment. She often found herself wondering whether Yeon-jung had committed murder, or what kind of crime could have led her to such a fate. While Boyoon was washing herself, Yoonjung casually spoke to her, asking if she was bathing. Boyoon responded briefly, confirming that she was. Despite Yoonjung's consistently polite and kind behavior toward her, Boyoon internally sensed something unsettling and difficult to fully trust about her, even though she could not clearly define what it was. Later in the evening, all 6 inmates gathered inside the room to have their meal together. As they ate, Choi Junye commented on the quality of the food, expressing clear dissatisfaction. She remarked that the facility should consider hiring a nutritionist, as the meals provided were of very poor quality and not acceptable for their standards. Hee-young, still engaged in the earlier conversation about food, commented that they should have at least asked the kitchen to grill some meat for them instead of accepting the usual meal. In response, Junye dismissed the idea and stated that eating meat during such times would only lead to weight gain. She added in a more mocking tone that if they kept gaining weight, they would not even be able to provide her with proper services like massages in the future. As this exchange continued, Yeonjung's attention shifted toward Boyoon. She noticed that Boyoon was sitting separately from the group, maintaining complete silence and eating her food alone, without engaging in any of the ongoing conversation. Her posture and behavior remained withdrawn, as if she was intentionally keeping distance from the others. After observing this for a moment, Yoonjung spoke up and asked Junye if Boyoon could be allowed to sit with them at the table and eat together instead of being isolated. Hee-young immediately reacted to this suggestion, stating that Junye had previously ordered Boyoon to eat on the bathroom floor, implying that she was not supposed to be given normal treatment. Yoonjung did not respond with hostility, but instead calmly explained her perspective. She said that, in her view, Boyoon had likely already repented enough for what had happened when she had allegedly acted out against the room leader. Yeonjung continued in a steady tone, saying that she understood how life worked in that environment, and that it would be better to allow Boyoon to join them from now on and move past the situation instead of continuing the punishment indefinitely. Junye then turned her attention directly toward Boyoon and spoke in a firm tone, saying that if Boyoon truly felt remorse, she should have been able to speak up for herself instead of remaining silent. Her words carried both criticism and expectation, as if she was testing Boyoon's response. At this point, Yoonjung also addressed Boyoon, encouraging her to listen to the room leader, but also to express herself when necessary, rather than staying completely quiet. Boyoon finally spoke, her voice cautious but clear, saying that she was not even sure what exactly she was supposed to be repenting for. Her response reflected confusion rather than defiance, as she seemed genuinely uncertain about the accusation or expectation placed on her. Hearing this, Hee-young immediately responded with suspicion, saying that Boyoon was speaking too confidently and without hesitation, and suggested that someone acting like that might be hiding something, or involved in something they were not openly admitting. Junye observed Boyoon silently during this exchange. Internally, she reflected that she had initially assumed Boyoon would easily break down or become submissive under pressure. However, the more she watched her, the more Boyoon appeared different from what she expected, less fragile, and more intriguing in her composed resistance. After a moment of thought, Junye spoke in a dismissive tone, saying that she would stop pushing the matter for now, adding that someone like Boyoon did not seem like the type who would simply follow instructions or be easily controlled anyway. She then turned toward Hee-young and instructed her to bring the water that had been prepared earlier, shifting the focus away from the discussion. Following that, all of them were told to proceed to the shower room. Once they arrived there, Junye immediately instructed Myung-sun to push Boyoon forward. Before Boyoon could properly process what was happening or react in time, she was forced back into the bathing area again. The situation escalated quickly, leaving her disoriented as control was taken from her without explanation or delay. Under Junye's direct orders, Boyoon was restrained. Her arms and legs were tied, and the instructions were carried out without hesitation by the others present. As she slowly regained awareness, she realized that she was completely immobilized and unable to move freely, confined within the bathing space, while the others remained in control of the situation. Junye then spoke to her in a taunting and controlling manner, asking if she was enjoying what she sarcastically referred to as a private spa experience. Her tone was mocking, carrying a sense of dominance as she continued speaking. She then brought up the earlier incident where Boyoon had slapped Sergeant Na, stating that she had not forgotten it. Junye implied that she intended to respond to that behavior in her own way, framing the current situation as a form of retaliation or play. She further described Boyoon as someone who was not easily entertaining or predictable, suggesting that breaking her composure would require more extreme measures. Her words became increasingly threatening as she implied that if the situation continued, she could push Boyoon to the point of losing herself entirely, metaphorically comparing it to turning her into a water ghost. Boyun was then repeatedly forced back into the water whenever she attempted to resist or stabilize herself, intensifying her inability to regain control of the situation. Each action reinforced the imbalance of power in the moment, leaving her increasingly overwhelmed in the atmosphere since morning. In her mind, she assumed that Woojin must have spoken earlier out of frustration, believing he was simply overwhelmed by the difficulties he had been facing lately. She convinced herself that there was no real possibility of him resigning from his position, as she considered him someone who, despite stress, would not easily abandon his responsibilities. However, her thoughts were suddenly disrupted when she noticed Woojin actually sitting down and writing his resignation letter. The sight startled her, and she froze for a moment, unable to immediately process what she was seeing. A wave of uncertainty rose within her, as she questioned whether she should intervene or approach him to ask about his decision. Yet hesitation quickly followed, rooted in fear of how the situation might unfold if she became involved. She thought that if she had known things would reach this point, she would have spoken to him earlier, in a calmer and more understanding manner. As she continued to observe him in silence, she reflected on his personality. In her thoughts, she acknowledged that he was kind, dependable, and generally good at his work. She even noticed the quiet charm in his presence, the way he carried himself with confidence, and strong shoulders that reflected both discipline and endurance. Despite all of this, she felt conflicted within herself and thought that she should not allow herself to become emotionally affected by him in such a way, even though the situation stirred something in her. Meanwhile, on another side, Junye and her group continued their actions of targeting and torturing Boyun without interruption. The environment remained harsh and oppressive as the situation escalated further. Junye casually asked Hee-young for a cigarette, and Hee-young handed it to her while commenting that Junye looked very pretty, almost like an actress. Junye, however, remained focused and detached, paying more attention to what was happening to Boyun than to the compliment she had received. Junye stood watching Myung-sun as she continued inflicting harm on Boyun. With a cold and controlled tone, she instructed that if they truly wanted Boyun to suffer for a longer period, they should lift her out of the water and repeat the same act again and again, maintaining the cycle without interruption. She remained standing in place, observing everything carefully, as though she was evaluating the situation without any visible emotion. After that, Junye turned her attention directly to Boyun and questioned her once again. She asked whether Boyun had made any changes regarding the situation they were dealing with, and further questioned whether she had become any different from Sergeant Na, whom she described as someone lacking even basic common sense. Junye continued speaking in a dismissive tone, stating that creating additional scenes or drama would not change anything for her, especially since Boyun was already a prisoner. She went on to say that even killing someone inside the prison meant nothing to her, reinforcing her dominance over the situation. She ordered Boyun to get out of the bathtub and present herself properly. She further insisted that Boyun obey her instructions, claiming that if she simply complied, her experience there could be made more comfortable compared to anyone else. Boyun attempted to respond, struggling to speak due to her exhaustion and distress. Her condition made it difficult for her to form complete sentences, and she could not fully express what she intended to say. Despite this, she managed to gather whatever strength she had left and moved closer to Junye. In a sudden act of defiance, she splashed water onto Junye's face in a sarcastic and provocative manner. This unexpected action visibly shocked Junye. In response, Junye's reaction changed sharply, and she began torturing Boyun by burning her with cigarettes. Boyun immediately screamed in pain, unable to contain her suffering as the torture continued. The situation persisted in the same intense manner for a prolonged period, with Boyun enduring continuous agony. On the other side, Woojin had arrived at Chanmi's office carrying his resignation letter in his hand. He calmly informed her that this was his resignation, as he had mentioned earlier, and requested her to accept it. As he spoke, Chanmi remained seated without making eye contact, not responding to him verbally or emotionally. The silence between them stretched for a moment, heavy and unresolved. After standing there briefly, Woojin eventually turned and left the office. As he walked away, Chanmi remained seated, still processing what had just happened. In her thoughts, she questioned how he could leave so abruptly and without any hesitation, as if detaching himself completely from everything they had been part of. Woojin, meanwhile, walked back reflecting on everything in his mind. He thought about how he had expected her to apologize to him for hitting him in the face. He also reflected on his long journey of 2 years, during which he had continuously challenged himself and worked hard to become a correctional officer. Although only a year had passed in this position, he now felt as though he was abandoning a place that had gradually begun to feel like a prison itself. These thoughts weighed heavily on him as he continued walking. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted when a senior member called out urgently for his help. The senior asked him not to inform the authorities about the situation, and explained that they had seen a patient inside the bathroom, but there was no one present in the clinic. Woojin immediately questioned whether any inmates had entered after the area had been closed. The senior responded that someone had gone inside first. Without wasting time, both of them rushed toward the bathroom. Upon entering, they discovered Boyun lying on the floor, while several inmates were seated around her in silence. Woojin immediately asked whether anything specific had occurred there, but none of the inmates responded to his question, leaving the atmosphere tense and unspoken. Yoonhee also arrived at the scene and silently observed what was happening. In her understanding, she sensed that Junye and Heyoung were acting as a controlling pair, one dominating while the other supported, and that they were abusing their positions over others repeatedly. She also felt that this pattern of behavior had become disturbingly normalized within the environment. Woojin quickly instructed the senior officer to go to the clinic and retrieve the defibrillator without delay. He then checked Boyun's pulse himself and realized that it was extremely weak. Without hesitation, he immediately began performing CPR. As he worked, he thought back to how he had always seen her getting into trouble, whether during examinations or even within her cell, and how, despite being aware of it, he had often failed to help her properly or had distanced himself from the situation. However, in this moment, seeing her condition far worse than before, something within him shifted. He silently resolved that this time he would not step back or ignore it. Instead, he was determined that he would save her, no matter what it took. All the inmates present in the area were watching Woojin closely as he performed CPR on Boyun with full focus and urgency. His actions were intense and determined, and despite the tense atmosphere, there was a visible sense of admiration among several inmates as they observed his effort to save her life. The room remained silent except for the urgency of the situation, and Woojin continued without hesitation until Boyun finally managed to regain consciousness due to his efforts. In that moment, Woojin thought to himself that he had barely managed to save her this time. Shortly afterward, Senior Dakyung arrived, carrying the defibrillator. Upon seeing that Woojin had already succeeded in reviving Boyun's condition, he appeared relieved and somewhat impressed. He asked Woojin whether Boyun was now stable and okay. Woojin confirmed the situation and, in a calm tone, said that it seemed she had been saved in time. Dakyung expressed relief and gratitude, stating that Woojin could return now and that he would take care of Boyun from that point onward. However, Woojin hesitated internally. A thought crossed his mind that there might be involvement between her and the inmate group, and because of that suspicion, he felt uneasy about leaving Boyun behind. Firmly, he stated that he would take responsibility for her and insisted that she be left in his care so he could personally take her to the clinic. He then instructed Dakyung to escort the inmates involved in the incident back to their cells. Dakyung attempted to reassure him that he could handle it, but Woojin did not accept the suggestion. His tone remained firm as he declared that those involved in the incident would not be forgiven. After stating this, he left the area with Boyun under his care, ensuring she was taken toward medical attention. Later, inside the cell, Heyoung and Junye were lying down, both appearing visibly nervous and unsettled. The atmosphere between them was tense and uneasy. Junye suddenly recalled a flashback of the incident, remembering how Heyoung had suggested allowing Myungsun to handle the situation and had planned to return to their cell, while Heyoung had also mentioned she would inform Dakyung to accompany them on their way out. Returning to the present moment, Junye recalled the humiliation she had experienced when Boyun spat on her face, and the memory continued to irritate her deeply. Heyoung, still visibly anxious, admitted that she could not calm herself down due to the situation involving Boyun. She expressed fear and uncertainty, saying she was worried that Boyun might still be alive, which made her extremely uneasy. In response, Junye coldly dismissed her concerns, stating that whether Boyun survived or not would not make any significant difference. She further claimed that no one could be held responsible for Boyun and suggested that they could even burn her body and cover up the incident if necessary. She harshly told Heyoung to remain silent and not blame anyone, adding that she should continue living as she always had, weak and submissive. Heyoung immediately apologized for troubling her, lowering her voice in submission. At that moment, both of them suddenly noticed Dakyung entering the cell. He informed them that Boyun was still unconscious, but her condition had been stabilized. Heyoung reacted with a forced sense of relief, saying that Boyun was a tough girl and that they might have handled her differently later anyway. Internally, she also thought that it was still better than her being dead. Junye then questioned Dakyung directly about Boyun's condition. Dakyung explained that they had originally intended to handle the situation themselves, but Woojin had unexpectedly intervened while passing by. He had rescued Boyun and immediately taken her to the clinic afterward. He also identified Woojin as a correctional officer from the security department and apologized for the disruption. Upon hearing this, Junye inquired further about Woojin. Takyung clarified that Woojin was indeed part of the security department and mentioned that he had also been the officer involved during Yoonhai's previous escort. Junye immediately reacted, stating that if he was from the security department, then he was likely one of Chanmi's close subordinates. She further added that if Chanmi were to learn about the incident, it could create serious trouble for them. Meanwhile, inside the clinic, Woojin remained beside Boyoon as she lay under medical care. Observing her condition, he thought to himself that her breathing had finally stabilized now that they were in a safer environment. He noted that the medical officer was still absent, and he looked around the room, realizing that there was no immediate professional help available. He observed that Boyoon's clothes and the bed sheet were completely wet, and she was still shivering from the aftermath of what had happened. As he continued checking her condition, he also noticed burn marks on her body, which further confirmed the severity of her suffering. Understanding that immediate care was necessary, he decided to treat her using the first aid box available in the clinic. At that moment, Boyoon suddenly regained consciousness. Woojin hesitated briefly before speaking, carefully explaining that she had fainted in the shower room and that he had brought her to the emergency area for treatment. He added that since her body had been wet and she was shivering, he had wiped her down, asking her not to misunderstand the situation. However, instead of responding immediately, Boyoon began crying. Overwhelmed by emotion, she suddenly hugged him and pleaded for help, saying that she did not want to die. Woojin froze for a moment, thinking to himself that she must have been through something truly terrifying and deeply lonely. Seeing her condition and emotional breakdown, he ultimately decided that he would help her and stay by her side to ensure she received proper care and protection. Chanmi stood alone on the rooftop, the night wind moving gently around her as she held a cigarette between her fingers. She took slow puffs, but her attention was not on the cigarette itself. Instead, her mind kept drifting back to Woojin. One by one, she replayed every word he had spoken earlier, the tone of his resignation, the way he had looked when he handed it in, and the quiet finality in his voice that had unsettled her more than she expected. As those memories repeated in her mind, she slowly reached for her phone. She opened the message thread with Woojin and stared at their previous conversations for a long moment. Her expression shifted slightly as she thought about how harsh and dismissive she had been toward him. A sense of regret quietly built inside her, and she told herself that she should at least apologize for slapping him. Her fingers began typing a message hesitantly, each word feeling heavier than the last. As she wrote, she felt an increasing sense of embarrassment, as if she was exposing something too personal. A thought crossed her mind that someone like her, older in rank, higher in position, should not be acting so emotionally towards someone younger and lower in hierarchy. That thought made her pause completely. After a brief silence, she deleted the message, leaving the screen empty again. She stood there for a moment longer, still holding her phone, before lowering it slightly as the cigarette burned down between her fingers. Her expression remained distant, caught between regret and restraint. Meanwhile, inside the clinic, Woojin was seated beside Boyoon's bed. The room was quiet now, the earlier chaos replaced with a tense calm. He carefully handed her a cup of warm tea, making sure she was stable enough to hold it. Boyoon accepted it slowly, still visibly weak and emotionally shaken. After a moment of silence, Boyoon lowered her gaze and began speaking softly. Her voice carried guilt and hesitation as she apologized for suddenly hugging him earlier. She explained that it had been an impulsive reaction, and she felt she had created an uncomfortable situation despite his efforts to help her. Her words came out carefully, as if she was still unsure whether she deserved to speak at all. She continued, her tone becoming more regretful, and apologized again for how disrespectful she had been toward him in the past. Woojin listened quietly, and then responded in a calm, steady voice. He told her that everything from before should be left in the past now, and what mattered was that she had regained consciousness safely. He added that he had genuinely been worried she might not wake up, and he was relieved that she had. Boyoon remained silent after hearing that, her eyes lowered as she processed his words without responding immediately. Woojin, trying to ease the atmosphere slightly, continued speaking in a more natural tone. He mentioned that he had seen her before when she was still outside the prison environment. At first, when he had seen her again inside the facility, he had not recognized her clearly, and had even thought she might be some kind of celebrity because of her presence and the way others seemed to react to her. He went on to say that later someone had told him she was a reporter, and he remembered that he had often come across her name when he was still preparing as an applicant. He explained that she had frequently appeared in news reports and articles, and for a period of time, she had felt like a public figure he kept hearing about from different places. He admitted that because of that, she had almost felt like a well-known personality in his mind. Woojin then shared more honestly that he was not someone who was particularly good at pushing himself into difficult challenges. That was part of the reason he had chosen a more stable path and become a correctional officer. He said that compared to him, seeing her work and passion had surprised him, and at some point, he had begun to admire that aspect of her without even realizing it. Boyun, however, slowly shook her head and looked disappointed. She told him that he was wrong to think that way. She said she had not done anything meaningful enough to be admired. In her own words, she described herself as someone stubborn and unruly, someone who often said or did what she believed was right, only to be pushed down or ridiculed by others for it. Her voice became quieter as she continued, saying that maybe it had always been her own fault, which was why even inside the prison she was still treated in the same way. She added an apology again, but this time it felt heavier, more personal. She admitted that she did not have anyone she could truly rely on, and then asked him for help in a more vulnerable tone. She said she could not return to the same room with the other inmates anymore. Under the current circumstances, she believed that if she went back, Junye would definitely kill her. Woojin listened to her without interruption, his expression turning more serious as he thought through the situation. He realized that transferring her would not be simple, as it would require approval from the sergeant. That meant the matter would escalate beyond his control, and he would likely need to reconsider his resignation if he wanted to intervene properly. As he processed this, he felt increasingly conflicted, realizing there was no easy way forward that would allow him to resolve everything cleanly. While he was still deep in thought, his phone suddenly rang. The name displayed on the screen was Chanmi. After answering the call, Woojin went to meet her on the rooftop. Chanmi was already there, standing under the night sky with a slightly unsteady posture. She casually said that the night air felt good and asked him to sit beside her. Then she suggested they have a drink together and talk honestly about everything that had been happening recently. Woojin immediately noticed that she was drunk. His expression tightened slightly as he tried to process the situation. Internally, he felt that this was becoming more complicated than he wanted. Out loud, he told her that she should not be drinking there, especially in a place where someone could easily see her and misunderstand the situation. Chanmi, however, responded without concern. She said that even people like Junye and her group drank secretly inside the facility, so there was no reason she could not do the same. She added that she had been working in the prison for 8 years and had more experience than most people there, so she was not afraid of anyone noticing. Woojin gently insisted again that she should be careful, but Chanmi suddenly shifted the conversation. She asked him directly whether he would leave immediately if she accepted his resignation. The question caught him off guard, and he paused for a moment. In his mind, he interpreted her, calling him first, as a sign that she did not truly want him to leave. He felt that he may have spoken too directly earlier. He then asked her again whether she was truly going to accept his resignation letter. Chanmi responded firmly that this was not the end of anything. She told him that he had already wasted years of his civil service experience, and that his mindset was too weak if he thought he could simply walk away. Woojin replied calmly that as long as the job involved a superior who could physically hit him, he could not continue in it. Hearing that, Chanmi looked at him more closely. She leaned slightly closer and asked if it had hurt that much, her tone softer but still slightly teasing due to her drunken state. Then she called him cute, which immediately made Woojin uncomfortable and shy. She continued speaking, saying that if he could not accept her apology, then she would even allow him to hit her back. Of the correctional facility. However, Chanmi admitted that she had disagreed with that view even then. She described her immediate supervisor, at the time the security sergeant, as a very kind person, almost to an excessive degree. The sergeant would calmly allow inmates to behave freely, even when they played inappropriate or strange games, and would gently ask them to switch to something else instead of strictly disciplining them. Chanmi often told her that she should be stricter and more serious, but the sergeant rarely listened. At that time, Chanmi found herself increasingly frustrated, feeling that such kindness disrupted the prison hierarchy and weakened authority. In her eyes, the system was becoming too soft to function properly. Then she recalled the incident that changed everything. A group of new inmates had arrived, and she and the sergeant were assigned to conduct their inspection. During that process, Chanmi had an uneasy feeling about one inmate in the middle. Something about her stood out as abnormal. She suspected that the woman was not an ordinary offender but someone involved in negligent homicide, what people often referred to as a psychopath. Chanmi said that she insisted on personally inspecting that inmate, believing she could handle her better than the kind sergeant. She even thought confidently that she would be able to manage the situation alone. However, the moment the inspection began, things escalated unexpectedly. She noticed something unusual being pulled out from the inmate's body, what looked like a concealed thread or hidden object. As she reached out to examine it more closely, the inmate suddenly kicked her violently, catching her off guard. The situation quickly turned chaotic. The inmate revealed that she had hidden a sharp object, something like a small knife, and the environment instantly shifted from inspection to danger. The kind sergeant, without hesitation, rushed toward the armed inmate, trying to intervene directly. The examination room was soon filled with screams as blood was seen, and panic spread among everyone present. Chanmi recalled how terrifying it was as the armed inmate began moving toward her, holding the knife. Woojin, listening to her story, appeared visibly tense and asked her to continue. Chanmi then explained that the emergency response team had been delayed at that time. Because of that delay, she had no choice but to fight back herself. She did, but it was far from easy. During the struggle, she was stabbed in the abdomen. She briefly indicated the injury area, saying that she had barely survived. However, the sergeant who had rushed in was killed during the incident. Chanmi added that after the attack and the chaos that followed, the system itself collapsed into silence. The truth of what happened was buried as authorities tried to control the situation. She then asked Woojin if he wanted to know what happened to that inmate afterward. Without waiting for much of a response, she revealed that the psychopath inmate eventually completed her 6-year sentence and had already been released before Woojin had even arrived at the facility. Woojin reacted with clear shock, asking if 6 years was really enough for what had happened. Chanmi explained that the sentence had been reduced due to a combination of factors. Witness statements had been altered, petitions had been submitted, and even the lawyer handling the case had performed poorly. She also suggested that the inmate likely had financial influence or powerful connections that affected the outcome. She continued, saying that after hearing how the case ended, she had felt completely drained. At one point, she seriously considered quitting the job altogether. But whenever she thought about it, she was overwhelmed by the feeling that she could not simply walk away after surviving something where someone else had died in her place. So instead, she stayed. She decided to remain in the system and continue working, even if it meant constantly watching over dangerous inmates entering the facility, while feeling that the system itself often failed to act properly. She admitted that over time, witnessing repeated negligence and disorder had slowly worn her down and made her question everything. Chanmi then looked at Woojin and asked him, in a more direct and vulnerable tone, whether what she felt was unnatural or unreasonable. She said she simply wanted him to understand her perspective and move forward without judgment. After a brief pause, she added that she needed to return for her night shift. Woojin gently stopped her, telling her that she was clearly drunk and should have rested in the first place. Without waiting for a response, he helped her move toward the resting room, holding her hand to support her balance. Both of them entered the staff resting area together. Woojin told her that he would take over her duty for the moment and that she should get some rest. Chanmi stood there quietly, but her emotions began to surface again. She called out his name and admitted that she had been very lonely. Chanmi began a physical training session with Woojin. On the other side, Miss Jisoo was assigned to watch over Boyoon in the clinic, as Woojin had instructed her to stay with her after being called away by Chanmi. Jisoo sat quietly near Boyoon, monitoring her condition while also thinking back to earlier events. She recalled the first time Boyoon had arrived at the facility, and how Woojin and the other officers had talked about her appearance at that time, even noting her beauty. That memory lingered in Jisoo's mind more than she expected. As she continued observing Boyoon, Jisoo found herself thinking that, even as a woman, she could not deny that Boyoon was very attractive. This led her to another thought that Woojin might also feel something similar toward her. That realization made her uneasy, and she silently told herself that she could never compare with her. She then shifted her thoughts back to the present situation, wondering if Woojin had been called away by Chanmi because of his resignation decision. She hoped that they would be able to resolve their conversation properly, and that things would settle down without further complications. The next morning, in another area of the facility, Hee-young sat on the ground with Myung-sun. She reminded Myung-sun that she had come into the facility after having a violent past outside, behaving like someone who had once been involved with gangs. She warned that if Boyoon had truly drowned and died during the incident, the situation would become extremely serious for all of them. She questioned what would happen to both of them if responsibility was traced back to their group. Hee-young further expressed her concern that Choi Jun-ye did not seem to care at all. According to her, Jun-ye had clearly stated that she would not take responsibility even if someone died or was removed from the situation, because everything could simply be covered up in the end. Hee-young repeated her anxiety, saying that this was exactly why she could not stay calm. She also mentioned that Jun-ye had never taken blame for anything in her life, and she doubted she ever would. In Hee-young's mind, it felt like they could become the next victims at any time, especially since they were always treated like disposable tools. Frustrated, she added that if Boyoon had actually died, Jun-ye would have shifted all responsibility onto them without hesitation. She felt that the only reason she was still staying silent was because Jun-ye had strong financial influence and connections inside the system. Hee-young then asked Myung-sun directly whether she truly intended to continue following Jun-ye. After a brief pause, She admitted that they realistically did not have many choices. In the end, she concluded that it might be better to remain patient, stay composed, and wait for the right opportunity. Myung-sun agreed quietly, and Hee-young tried to calm herself, saying she would try to stay controlled most of the time going forward. Meanwhile, inside the security office, Chanmi entered and greeted Woojin with a morning acknowledgement. Woojin was already seated, reviewing management logs and reports with a focused expression. Chanmi observed him briefly, noticing that he avoided direct eye contact with her. In her mind, she thought he looked particularly composed and professional, and she found herself unconsciously paying more attention to him than she intended. She asked him if he was working on anything specific. Woojin responded that he was reviewing the management logs of a person of interest. This immediately caught Chanmi's attention. She asked if there was any issue with a particular inmate. Woojin confirmed that there was a concern involving inmate 5842, which made Chanmi visibly uneasy. Internally, she thought that it would be better if she could simply forget about that woman altogether. Trying to remain composed, she asked again if there was a problem related to that inmate. Woojin explained that the incident had occurred before their meeting on the rooftop, stating that in the shower room, the inmate had clearly been subjected to physical assault and torture, involving water by other cell members. Upon hearing this, Chanmi suddenly raised her voice and questioned why he had reported it so late. Woojin calmly responded that at the time, she had been drunk and on night shift, which made direct reporting difficult at that moment. He then added that Boyoon had now been placed under quarantine and was receiving fluids in the nurse's office. Following that, Woojin stated clearly that he intended to transfer her to a different cell for her safety. Chanmi was left in complete shock upon hearing his request. Chanmi, accompanied by 2 other security officers, made her way toward the main cell block. Her expression was cold and controlled, but her steps carried clear authority. As she arrived, she found Senior Dak-young already present at the entrance. Chanmi looked at her with visible frustration and said sharply that she seemed to be doing a very good job acting like Junye's dog. Without waiting for a response, she immediately ordered her to open the main door. Inside the cell, Yeonjung was quietly serving food to Junye. Junye, while eating, frowned and complained that Yeonjung always forgot she hated bean sprout soup. She added sarcastically that perhaps Yeonjung was becoming forgetful because of her age. Yeonjung, visibly tense and uncomfortable, forced herself to respond politely, saying that she understood. Before the atmosphere could settle, the cell door suddenly opened. Chanmi entered with the security officers behind her and immediately instructed Junye to stand up. Junye, still seated, calmly replied that she needed a moment since she had not even finished her food. She added that they had already completed their daily routine and questioned why Chanmi was interfering. Chanmi, however, remained firm. She stated that she had already received reports about what had happened in the shower room after routine duties, specifically that inmate 5342 Boyoon had been assaulted and nearly lost her life. Junye initially tried to deny it, but Chanmi cut her off sharply, telling her to stop pretending. She said she already knew everything, including the fact that they had left the area earlier than they should have. At that moment, Myung-sun suddenly stepped forward and declared that she would take all responsibility for what had happened to Boyoon. Chanmi immediately dismissed that statement and said she was not speaking to Myung-sun. Her attention remained fixed on Junye. Junye, after a brief pause, admitted it. She said she was the one who had done it, explaining coldly that Boyoon had failed to follow the rules. As the room leader, she claimed she had to discipline her. She added that if someone else could put their hands on her and then return to work as if nothing had happened, then she could do the same. Chanmi's expression changed sharply, and she raised her voice, saying that the situation had been caused by negligence during duty and that they had no right to treat other people's lives so lightly. Junye, unfazed, accused Chanmi of manipulating the situation and insisted that she simply hated Boyoon from the beginning. At that moment, Chanmi's mind briefly drifted into a flashback. She remembered a past conversation with Woojin, where he had asked her to change Boyoon's cell. She recalled telling him that it was not possible at the time because the warden had already arranged for Boyoon to be placed in Junye's room. She also remembered explaining the situation to Woojin and his reaction, his disappointment, his questioning of her honesty, and the tension that had formed between them after she had denied responsibility. That memory lingered heavily in her mind before snapping back to the present. Returning to reality, Woojin's earlier words echoed in her thoughts, especially his frustration and his decision to question her integrity. For a brief moment, her expression tightened, as if she was carrying more than just authority in that instant. Without further hesitation, Chanmi stepped fully into control of the situation. She repeated that Junye should stand up immediately. When Junye continued sitting, Chanmi suddenly grabbed the bowl of soup from the table and poured it over her, causing an immediate shock and chaos inside the cell. Junye reacted instantly, grabbing Chanmi in anger. Tension escalated in a split second, but security officers quickly intervened, shouting at Junye to release her immediately. Chanmi, now steady again, turned her gaze toward all the inmates in the cell. Her voice was firm and commanding as she addressed everyone. She stated that all of them were guilty in one way or another, and that performing self-reflection every day was not enough to erase their actions. She warned that if they ever repeated such behavior again, it would be formally added to their sentences. She then ordered that, from the next day onward, the shower rooms must be properly locked after use so that no one could access them afterward. After delivering her instructions, Chanmi turned and left the cell without looking back, despite Junye shouting after her. As she walked out, she spoke briefly to Dakyung, telling her that it was shameful how she had been acting like their subordinate. She advised her not to behave that way again. However, as Chanmi continued walking, her expression slowly shifted. In her mind, she realized the truth she had been avoiding. Everything she had done, the anger, the confrontation, and even the way she had acted, was not only about discipline or justice. It was also because she did not want Woojin to leave. She had been trying to hold on to him in her own way, and only now was she beginning to understand how deeply that feeling had influenced her actions. Hee-young looked at Junye with clear discomfort as she noticed the soup had spilled all over her clothes. The situation had already created tension in the cell, and Hee-young cautiously suggested that she should go to the bathroom and clean herself properly. Her tone was careful, as she did not want to provoke her further. However, Junye immediately reacted with irritation. She raised her voice sharply at Hee-young, refusing the suggestion and instead demanding a towel to clean herself. Her expression was full of anger and humiliation as she wiped off the mess in frustration. While she cleaned herself, her mind was focused elsewhere. Internally, she thought that Chanmi had crossed every possible boundary that day without hesitation. The way Chanmi had acted replayed in her mind, and it left her with a deep sense of humiliation. Quietly, she told herself that now she would simply wait and observe, because sooner or later, Chanmi would have her turn as well. Meanwhile, Boyoon had been moved back to her previous cell. She sat there in silence for a while, taking in her surroundings again. As she stayed still, her thoughts drifted back to the moments before, specifically when Chanmi had told her she could temporarily remain in her previous cell. Chanmi had also said that no matter where she was placed, situations like this might still follow her, and it would be better for her to stay alone for the time being. Boyoon reflected on those words carefully. Even though Chanmi often appeared harsh and strict, she began to wonder if there had been a hidden intention to help her in some way. Her thoughts then shifted to Woojin. She considered whether he had truly kept his promise by saving her life during the critical moment. Despite everything she had gone through, she felt a small sense of relief thinking that he had managed to rescue her, even if it must have been extremely difficult for him. Although the cell still felt cramped, cold, and uncomfortable, especially with Junye's presence still looming in her memory, Boyoon felt a slight sense of calm, just from being alive and no longer in immediate danger. As she prepared to rest, the quiet was broken by the arrival of another correctional officer. The officer approached her politely, apologizing for the disturbance and asking if she remembered him. Boyoon looked at him with caution and asked if there was any issue, reminding him that officers were not usually supposed to approach inmates without reason. He introduced himself as a correctional officer and explained that he had noticed the conditions she was in. He mentioned that lying on a bare floor in such heat would not be good for her health. With that, he said he had brought a cooling mat along with some snacks for her comfort. Boyoon immediately recognized him as Officer Kyung-shik and calmly refused the items. She stated firmly that she did not need any special treatment and preferred not to accept them. She then directly told him that she had no interest in him whatsoever and asked him to stop approaching her or trying to interact with her in that way, as she considered it inappropriate and uncomfortable. Kyung-shik's expression changed immediately. His polite demeanor faded and his tone became sharper. He responded by saying that what she called kindness was being misunderstood. His words quickly turned hostile as he insulted her, implying that she was not as innocent as she appeared, and reminding her that she was in prison for a reason. He warned her to remember her position and said that he would eventually get his revenge sooner or later. After saying this, he left the cell abruptly. Boyoon remained seated in silence, visibly shaken. Her body tensed slightly as she tried to process what had just happened. The sudden shift from forced kindness to aggression left her confused and uneasy, and she sat still for a long time, unable to fully calm herself. The next morning, Yoon-hae was playing basketball with other inmates in the yard. As she moved around the court, she noticed Woojin walking nearby while checking his phone. At that moment, he received a message from Chanmi informing him that Boyoon had been placed temporarily in a confinement room and would later be relocated. Woojin read the message and responded briefly, thanking Chanmi for handling the situation. In his mind, he felt that he had at least managed to keep his promise to Boyun for now, which gave him a slight sense of relief. Shortly after, Chanmi sent him another message, casually asking him to join her for a drink since the weather was hot. Woojin glanced at the message and remained thoughtful, not immediately responding. From a distance, Yoonhye watched Woojin quietly. She found herself admiring his appearance, noticing how composed and calm he looked even while working. As she observed him, her mind also briefly returned to the earlier incident involving Boyun, recalling how quickly everything had escalated and how intense the situation had become. Trying to draw attention to herself, Yoonhye suddenly acted as though she felt dizzy and unsteady. She moved slightly, as if she might lose balance, prompting nearby inmates to notice her behavior. Woojin quickly saw her condition and approached to check on her. Concerned, he decided it was better to take her to the infirmary himself to ensure she was safe. Other inmates watched in confusion, as she had appeared completely fine just moments before. While being supported by him, Yoonhye casually mentioned that she had actually wanted to do cardio training with him, suggesting they could work out together since they were alone. Woojin, still focused on her supposed condition, ended up going along with the situation as they moved toward the restroom area where the training session began. Kyung-shik caught Woojin while he was conducting a workout session with Yoonhye. As the training session came to an end, Kyung-shik remarked that he had initially assumed it was the warden inside the restroom, but it turned out to be Woojin instead. He added that he had noticed earlier that Woojin seemed to possess quite an impressive weapon. Hearing this, Woojin felt deeply embarrassed, thinking to himself that his luck had truly been terrible. Anyone could have discovered them, but of all people, it had to be Kyung-shik. Kyung-shik then continued, saying that he assumed Woojin had also managed to carry out a training session with inmate 1598, noting that the girl had practically become an idol and implying that Woojin must already know everything about her. Woojin looked at him seriously and requested that whatever Kyung-shik had seen should remain a secret. In response, Kyung-shik casually agreed, stating that since they were both men, it was only natural to keep each other's secrets. He then shifted the conversation, expressing curiosity about Woojin's personal experience and admitting that he himself wanted to conduct a similar workout session with inmate 5342. Woojin asked who that was, and Kyung-shik explained that it was the new inmate they had seen together earlier. He described her as quite pretty, identifying her as the former journalist, Boyun. However, he complained that no matter how much he tried to approach her, she remained distant and difficult, even calling her arrogant. According to him, she had told him to stop harassing her, despite him believing that he had not said anything inappropriate. He further added that such a personality only made him more eager to pursue her. At this point, Woojin's expression turned serious, and he firmly responded that even though he himself had conducted a workout session with inmate 1598, the way Kyung-shik spoke about such encounters was not something he was comfortable with. He told him to drop the matter entirely. Kyung-shik, confused by the sudden change in tone, replied that he did not understand why Woojin was taking things so seriously. The following day, the warden was seen conducting a workout session with Eunhye, along with another inmate whom Eunhye did not recognize. Meanwhile, Boyun was in her cell when the security officer Jisoo approached her and informed her that inmates in solitary confinement were required to participate in outdoor exercise once every 3 days. She asked Boyun to step outside the cell for this purpose. Boyun agreed, and the two of them went outside for the exercise session. While Boyun was outside, Yoonjung approached her and greeted her warmly, mentioning that it had been a few days since they had last met. She asked about Boyun's condition and commented that, being young, she seemed to have recovered quickly. Yoonjung then noticed the cigarette burn marks on Boyun and remarked that it must have been very painful. Boyun responded that she was fine and expressed her gratitude for what had happened earlier. She recalled the time when she had been eating on the floor and how Yeonjung had stood up for her, speaking against Junye and making it possible for her to join the others at the table. She admitted that the gesture had truly meant a lot to her. Yeonjung, however, brushed it off, saying that it was nothing and that she had not been much help in the end. Boyun insisted that she had been genuinely thankful ever since, explaining that she was simply a cautious person now and found it difficult to trust others. Yeonjung acknowledged her feelings, saying that she understood. She then pointed out that Boyun might have already noticed something unusual about her, hinting at the reason behind her current situation and asking if that was why Boyun remained so guarded. Boyun replied that she would like to hear her story, if Yeonjung did not mind sharing it. Yeonjung then began to tell her story, revealing that she had killed 3 people in a very unusual way. Yeonjung began telling her story, explaining that a long time ago she had once loved someone deeply. After they had confessed their feelings for each other and entered into a romantic relationship, she had felt like the happiest woman in the world. She went on to describe how they had started living together, sharing their lives as though they were a married couple, eating meals together and sleeping side by side. According to her, the years they spent together became the most precious memories of her life. She continued by saying that, one day, the man had told her that he wanted a child. It was only 6 months later, at his wedding, that she came to understand what he had truly meant when he said goodbye to her. She realized that a child was about to be born by his side, as he had already been married. He had told her that she was the person he had loved the most, and that he wished her happiness, while she, in turn, had believed that she would never forget him. In the end, she said, she had chosen a path that she believed would leave everyone happy, and she described arriving at his newlywed home with a weapon in her hand. At this point, Boyun interrupted her midway and asked whether she was the culprit behind the Dahong Dong family murder case. Yeonjung acknowledged this, stating that since Boyun had been a journalist, she had guessed correctly. She admitted that she was the one who had killed the man and his pregnant wife, adding that the case had spread all over the news and had ultimately led to her being sentenced. Yeonjung then continued her account in a more formal, almost detached manner, recounting how, late at night, the defendant had unlawfully entered the victim's home. She described how the man, referred to as Mr. A, had been struck with a blunt object while he was asleep, and how Mrs. B, who had pleaded for her life, had also been killed in a similar manner. She noted that the woman had been pregnant at the time and that the act had resulted in the death of the unborn child as well. After committing the crime, the defendant had set fire to the house and fled the scene. During the subsequent trial, she explained, the defendant had shown no remorse and had provided incomprehensible justifications, leading the court to conclude that there was no possibility of rehabilitation. As a result, it had been deemed appropriate to permanently isolate the defendant from society through the highest legal penalty, which was the death sentence. As Yeonjung was about to continue, a security officer interrupted, announcing that only 5 minutes remained for the outdoor exercise session and urging them to wrap things up. Having listened to the entire story, Boyun asked Yeonjung whether she regretted what she had done. Yeonjung responded that she did not know, adding that even if she were to return to that moment in time, she did not believe anything would have changed. She admitted that, after having burned everything down, she could not honestly say she would have acted differently. Boyun replied that she could not comprehend what she had just heard. She stated that it was not a story she could empathize with and emphasized that, regardless of the motive, inflicting such harm on innocent lives was an unforgivable crime. She added that the only people who might have been able to forgive such actions were no longer alive. In response, Yeonjung asked whether it would be fair to interpret Boyun's reaction as an inability to understand intellectually, even if she might feel something on a more instinctive level. She suggested that if Boyun were ever to fall deeply in love and then have that love taken away from her, she might be able to understand her, even if only a little. After this exchange, Boyun seemed to collect herself, internally reminding herself that she could not allow herself to love anyone again. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Chanmi was drinking with Woojin. Woojin remarked that it might not be appropriate to drink during working hours, but Chanmi dismissed his concern, telling him not to be afraid and insisting that such things did not matter in that prison. Woojin responded by acknowledging her authority, commenting that she was indeed an important person there. Chanmi then observed that he had been acting strangely lately. She went on to say that she had kept her promise, pointing out that, even though she disliked Boyun, she had still done everything Woojin had asked of her. Woojin expressed his appreciation, admitting that he was grateful for what she had done and that he did not know how he could repay her. Chanmi replied that he could indeed repay her, before suddenly running toward a ladder and climbing it. As she ascended, she explained that it was the highest point in the prison and the only place where no one could see them, then called out for him to follow her. Woojin had started teasing Chanmi as she made her way up the ladder, his tone light and playful as he watched her climb. Despite his teasing, he soon followed after her, and before long both of them reached the top. Once they were up there, Chanmi paused for a moment and then told him to look out at the surroundings. She gestured toward the wide open view visible from that height, making it clear that this spot offered a complete scene of the area that could not be seen from below. Woojin reacted with genuine astonishment, admitting that he could hardly believe what he was seeing, as the view was far more expansive and striking than he had expected. Chanmi, taking in his reaction, commented that the place was truly amazing. She went on to explain, in a calmer and more reflective tone, that ever since she had arrived at the prison, she would come to this very spot whenever she felt frustrated, overwhelmed, or emotionally burdened. According to her, it had become a kind of refuge, where she could release everything she had been holding in. She elaborated that from up there, When she looked down at everything, even the most difficult and heavy problems she carried began to feel small, almost insignificant, as though they no longer had the same weight they once did. As she spoke, her demeanor softened, and she reached out to take Woojin's hand, holding on to him. She admitted that recently, being with him had started to feel even more comforting than coming to that place alone. There was a noticeable change in her tone, becoming more personal and vulnerable. Slowly, she moved closer to him, closing the distance between them without hesitation. The moment became more lovely as they looked at each other, and eventually, they shared a kiss. After that, their closeness deepened further, and they went on to engage in another workout session together. The following morning, Junye approached the warden with a clear sense of urgency and frustration. Without hesitation, she demanded that Chanmi be removed from the facility. Her request came abruptly, catching the warden off guard, and he responded with visible surprise. He asked her whether something had happened between the two of them that had led to such a demand. Junye, clearly agitated, responded sharply, criticizing him for being unaware of the situation within the prison. She accused him of not paying attention to what was happening around him, and then proceeded to describe the incident that had angered her. She explained that while she had been eating, Chanmi had suddenly entered and poured hot soup over her head. She added that Chanmi had also threatened her, warning that her sentence would be extended if she did not comply with her demands. Junye expressed her resentment, stating that Chanmi behaved as though she held absolute authority, almost like a judge, and had become increasingly arrogant in her actions. The warden, maintaining a measured tone, questioned whether Junye herself might have been involved in some form of trouble again. However, Junye immediately pushed back, warning him to be careful with his words. She reminded him of the financial support she had provided and implied that she should not be treated disrespectfully, suggesting that things could become problematic for him if he continued in that manner. At this point, the warden's patience began to wear thin. He responded by pointing out that he had already been more than considerate toward her. He listed the privileges she had been granted, such as access to alcohol, cigarettes, and the shower room, despite these being strictly prohibited for inmates. He also brought up Boyun, explaining that he had entrusted her to Junye under the pretense of helping her, yet she had failed to act accordingly. He then questioned whether she was now using those privileges against him, implying that he was incapable of handling the situation with Chanmi. The warden went on to clarify that the facility was not a typical workplace but a government institution where removing someone was not a simple matter. He emphasized that the sergeant played a crucial role in maintaining the operation of the prison, and without her, the entire system would struggle to function. Instead of escalating conflicts, he suggested that they should focus on finding a way to coexist without constant confrontation. Junye, however, interpreted his response differently. She remarked that his words had given her a new idea, though her tone carried a sense of sarcasm and disdain. She criticized his mindset, extending her judgment to all government employees, claiming that they were all alike trapped, powerless, and destined to remain miserable in their positions. She then shifted the conversation into a direct ultimatum. She declared that she would give him one final chance to prove himself, instructing him to get rid of Chanmi within a month, regardless of the means required, even if it involved threatening her life. She warned that failure to comply would result in immediate consequences, that he would no longer receive his monthly allowance, inmates would be prohibited from having workout sessions with him, and she would expose all the corruption within the facility. She emphasized her influence, financial power, and ability to act on these threats, making it clear that he should not underestimate her. Having said everything she intended to, she left abruptly, leaving the warden standing there, visibly frustrated and burdened by the situation. Later that evening, Correctional Officer Kyung-shik was seen observing another officer as she brought food toward the cells. He initiated a casual conversation, remarking that she must have been working hard and asking whether the meal was being prepared before heading to the disciplinary room. The officer confirmed that it was indeed the dinner meant for that purpose. Kyung-shik then explained that he was on security duty that day and mentioned that there was something he needed to check quickly, referring vaguely to a security alert. His tone remained calm and reassuring as he offered to take responsibility for delivering the meal card himself once he was done. He assured her that she did not need to worry, promising that he would personally distribute the food to the detainees in the disciplinary section. After briefly confirming with her that it would be acceptable for him to handle it, he waited for her response. Once she agreed, the officer left the area, trusting him with the task. As soon as he was alone, Kyung-shik's demeanor shifted subtly. He reached into his pocket and took out something concealed, then carefully and deliberately mixed it into the food. After completing this, the meal was later delivered as planned. Unaware of what had been done, Boyun received the food that had been tampered with, bringing the sequence of events to a tense and foreboding close. Boyun soon began to feel extremely unwell. A wave of dizziness washed over her, making her body feel heavy and her eyelids increasingly difficult to keep open. At the same time, a strong sense of nausea overtook her, and she found herself struggling to stay conscious. In her weakened state, she thought that she should have asked for a different medication earlier, suspecting that something was not right. As her vision blurred, she noticed that the other inmates in nearby cells also appeared to have fallen asleep. That realization made her uneasy, leading her to suspect that they might all have consumed something unusual during dinner. As the discomfort intensified, she became convinced that something must have been mixed into the food. Panicking, she thought that she needed to force herself to vomit as quickly as possible, fearing that whatever she had ingested could cause serious harm if it remained in her system. Acting on that instinct, she tried to make herself throw up. However, despite her efforts, she could not fully expel whatever was affecting her. Her body continued to weaken, and eventually, she lost consciousness and collapsed. Not long after, Kyung-shik appeared in the area. He observed the scene calmly, noting that all the inmates had fallen asleep just as he had intended after tampering with the food. Looking around, he thought to himself that although not all of them were as striking as Boyun, many of them still had appealing features. He was also aware that the security cameras in that area had been turned off, which in his mind created the perfect opportunity to act without being seen. Convinced that the situation was in his control, he considered it the right moment to carry out what he described as his duty, believing that it was also his chance to take revenge on Boyun. Just as he was about to proceed, a voice suddenly called out from behind him, asking if he was looking for something. Startled, he froze for a moment, his mind racing as he worried that someone might have caught him in the act. Trying to compose himself, he turned and asked whether the person had not eaten the meal. When he looked back, he realized it was the older woman from the cells, the one he referred to as the auntie. She confronted him directly, reminding him that he had said he would teach a lesson. He attempted to deny it, claiming she had misunderstood, but she insisted that she had heard him clearly. She told him that since he was already there, he should go ahead and take his revenge, adding that he could not deceive her. She then provocatively suggested that he should carry out a workout session. Following this, he ended up engaging in a workout session with her. By the time it was over, he felt completely drained and exhausted. As he caught his breath, he reflected that the older woman had only provided a momentary distraction, and that his real focus should have been on Boyun. Regaining his intent, he decided to go back to her. Meanwhile, another female security officer approached Woo Jin and asked whether he was part of the security team. He confirmed that he was. She then explained that the officer who had earlier taken the meal cart had not returned it. She mentioned that she had gone to check but found the area locked from the inside, leaving her uncertain about what was happening. Woo Jin, sensing that something was wrong, asked whether the meal cart had been taken to a specific location. She confirmed that it had been sent to the disciplinary room. Hearing this, Woo Jin was immediately alarmed. The pieces began to fall into place in his mind, and he recognized a troubling pattern. Without wasting any time, he hurried upstairs and contacted Jisoo, apologizing for the sudden request, but urgently asking for the master key to the disciplinary room. She informed him that it was in the drawer. As he retrieved it, Woo Jin fully realized Kyung-shik's intentions, and became convinced that he must have gone to Boyun. Back in the disciplinary area, Kyung-shik had already reached Boyun's cell. Seeing her unconscious and defenseless, he prepared himself, convinced that he might not get another chance. He muttered to himself that he had to act now, determined to carry out the workout session with her. However, just as he was about to begin, Woo Jin arrived from behind and shouted at him to stop. Woo Jin demanded that he get out immediately, warning him that there would be serious consequences if he did not. Kyung-shik, clearly surprised by his sudden appearance, responded with a mocking tone. He accused Woo Jin of hypocrisy, pointing out that Woo Jin himself had engaged in similar workout sessions with another inmate, and questioned why he was now acting as if he had the authority to stop him. Woo Jin replied firmly that if that was the case, then they could both face punishment together, but he would not allow Kyung-shik to harm her. His tone made it clear that he was serious and unwilling to back down. In response, Kyung-shik smirked and deliberately broke the key that would have allowed Woo Jin to unlock the cell door from the outside. This act prevented Woo Jin from entering easily. Frustrated and angered, Woo Jin began shouting at him to open the door. Kyung-shik, maintaining his taunting attitude, told him that if he wanted to get inside, he would have to break the bars himself. He added mockingly that he would remain there to keep him company. With that, Kyung-shik turned his attention back toward Boyun and moved forward to continue his actions. At that critical moment, Woo Jin drew a pistol and aimed it directly at him, escalating the situation to a dangerous and intense confrontation. The sudden attack caused Kyung-shik to collapse instantly, his body giving in as he lost consciousness on the spot. For a brief second, the tension in the air lingered, but there was no movement from him afterward. Woo Jin stood there, still on edge, his breathing uneven as he processed what had just happened. His attention quickly shifted toward the locked bars of the cell. He moved closer and tried to open the lock, thinking to himself that he should have attempted this sooner instead of wasting precious time. While struggling with the lock, he repeatedly called out Boyun's name, his voice filled with concern as he asked if she was all right. However, there was no response from her. She remained completely unconscious, lying motionless in a way that only deepened his worry. After some effort, Woojin finally succeeded in opening the door. The moment he stepped inside, the frustration and anger he had been holding back surged to the surface. Without hesitation, he turned toward Kyung-shik and began beating him. Each strike seemed to carry the weight of everything that had led up to that moment. Even in his weakened and barely conscious state, Kyung-shik managed to mutter something sarcastic, accusing Woojin of suddenly acting righteous and suggesting that he believed he could get away with anything because of his appearance. However, Woojin showed no real interest in engaging with him. His anger burned briefly, but it quickly lost its focus. What truly pulled his attention away was the sight of Boyun. Looking at her more closely now, he noticed just how severe her condition was. Her body appeared limp and unresponsive, her face pale, and there were clear signs that she was heavily intoxicated. It looked as though she might vomit again at any moment, even in her unconscious state. That realization immediately shifted his priorities. Whatever anger he had toward Kyung-shik became secondary in that instant. Deciding that her condition required immediate medical attention, Woojin resolved to take her to the infirmary without delay. He thought briefly that it would be better to leave Kyung-shik there and allow Sergeant Chanmi to handle him later. Acting quickly, he lifted Boyun carefully, making sure to support her properly, and began moving toward the clinic. His pace was urgent, yet controlled, as he carried her through the corridors. As he made his way there, his thoughts grew heavier. He found himself reflecting on how he had assumed that once she left that room earlier, things would settle down. Yet, instead, trouble seemed to keep following her again and again. This repeated pattern made him realize that he needed to be far more vigilant when it came to her safety. The sense of responsibility he felt toward her became more pronounced with each step he took. Nearby, the same middle-aged woman who had earlier confronted Kyung-shik observed the entire scene from a distance. As she watched Woojin carrying Boyun with urgency and concern, she formed her own impression of him. In her mind, this incident would likely improve his reputation, as his actions gave off the image of someone dependable and protective, almost like a gentleman in the way he handled the situation. When Woojin finally reached the clinic, he brought Boyun inside, where the doctor immediately began examining her condition. After assessing her, the doctor explained that since Boyun had already vomited most of the substance and had been given appropriate medication, the immediate danger had lessened. However, she emphasized that Boyun needed proper rest to recover fully. Boyun, though weak, acknowledged this. Despite her fragile state, Boyun managed to speak up and inform the doctor that there were other inmates in the disciplinary room who also required medical attention. She explained that they had all consumed the same substance she had, implying that they were likely in similar condition. Hearing this, the doctor became visibly alarmed. She responded quickly, stating that treatment was already being provided but that she would go down personally to ensure everything was under control. Before leaving, she asked Woojin to remain there and watch over Boyun, trusting him with her care. Once the doctor left, the clinic grew quiet. Woojin stayed beside Boyun, his mind drifting as he looked at her resting form. He began to think back on everything that had happened since her arrival. This was already the third time she had been caught in a serious situation. The first had been after the accident, when both her body and mind had been deeply wounded, leaving her exhausted and emotionally fragile. The second had been when she had collapsed in the bathhouse, bleeding and desperately pleading to be saved. And now, this third incident had unfolded, once again putting her in danger. The repetition of these events weighed on him, making it impossible for him to ignore how vulnerable her situation truly was. As he sat there, lost in thought, Boyun slowly began to regain consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open, and in a weak voice, she called out his name. Her tone carried a sense of familiarity and quiet relief. She told him that every time she found herself opening her eyes after such moments, he was always there beside her. There was a softness in her words as she thanked him for always helping her, acknowledging the consistency of his presence in her most difficult moments. After a brief pause, she asked him to come closer, explaining that she wanted to speak to him more properly. Woojin responded without hesitation. He reached over and closed the curtains around them, creating a more private space within the clinic. Boyun began to speak more openly, her voice still weak, but steady. She admitted that she had stopped trusting people after being repeatedly betrayed by those she once believed in. The pain of those experiences had made her cautious and distant. She explained that even during the violent incident in the prison, when she had begged to be saved, she had felt conflicted. A part of her had wanted to rely on him, to believe in him, while another part had resisted, fearing that placing her trust in someone again would only lead to more disappointment and hurt. However, she went on to say that something had changed. Through his consistent actions, through the way he had protected her and stayed by her side, she had begun to understand something differently. His sincerity had gradually broken through her fear. She admitted that now, no matter what happened, she felt less afraid and less burdened by pain than she had before. Simply knowing that he was there for her brought her a sense of comfort she had not expected to feel again. Listening to her, Woo Jin felt a quiet shift within himself. Her words carried weight, and they made him aware of how much his presence had come to mean to her. For a moment, he seemed almost shy, his usual composure softening under the intensity of the moment. Drawn by that closeness, they leaned toward each other without needing to say anything more. The silence between them spoke for itself, and in that moment, they shared a kiss, sealing the emotional connection that had been building between them. On the other side, the medical officer had begun inspecting all the inmates inside the cells, moving from one to another to assess their condition. The atmosphere in the area was tense but controlled, as the aftermath of the incident was still being managed. Chanmi was also present there in her role as a security officer, overseeing the situation and ensuring that everything remained under control during the inspection. As she moved through the area, Chanmi happened to notice the doctor already there, actively examining the inmates. The doctor, upon seeing her, remarked that she had arrived quickly, despite being off duty. She then proceeded to explain the situation in a composed but serious tone. According to her, it appeared that Kyung-shik had attempted to carry out something dangerous by mixing sleeping pills into the inmates' food. She further added that it was Woo Jin who had arrived in time and managed to handle the situation before it escalated further. Thanks to his timely intervention, the consequences had been contained. The doctor reassured her that, fortunately, none of the patients were in critical condition and that the overall situation was not as severe as it could have been. Hearing this, Chanmi's expression hardened. Without hesitation, she turned toward Kyung-shik and began beating him, her actions fueled by anger and frustration. It was clear that this was not just about the current incident, but also about the accumulation of problems he had been responsible for recently. Her reaction carried a sense of pent-up irritation, as though she had reached the limit of her tolerance for his behavior. After confronting him, Chanmi turned back to the doctor and asked whether any of the inmates had been harmed more seriously, specifically referring to Boyun. The doctor responded that there was no immediate danger. She explained that Boyun was currently resting in the infirmary and was stable. She also mentioned her by identification, noting that she believed it was inmate 5342, confirming that she had already been attended to and was under observation. Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, Woo Jin and Boyun were together, their dynamic once again shifting into a more private and romantic space as they engaged in another workout session. Chanmi eventually made her way toward the infirmary area where Woo Jin and Boyun were already inside, separated from view by closed curtains. As she approached, she slowed her steps, her attention sharpening as faint, indistinct sounds came from within. It was enough for her to understand what was happening without needing to see it directly. She stopped completely in front of the curtain, standing still for a moment as her expression tightened. A wave of conflicted emotions rose in her at once. Anger surfaced first, sharp and immediate, followed by a deeper, more complicated frustration that she did not openly express. For a brief moment, her thoughts became unstable. She imagined herself walking straight in and confronting both of them, even allowing violent impulses to form in her mind. But despite the intensity of those thoughts, she did not act on them. Instead, she remained rooted in place. While she was still standing there, the doctor approached from behind and asked why she had been lingering in that area for so long. The sudden voice made Chanmi tense, and she quickly turned her attention away from the curtain. She immediately tried to cover up her presence, her voice slightly unnatural, as she claimed that something had gone into her eye, and she was trying to check it. Her explanation came out rushed, clearly meant to redirect suspicion rather than describe an actual problem. The doctor, taking her words seriously, stepped closer, as if intending to examine her condition more carefully. This caused Chanmi to become visibly uncomfortable. She instinctively leaned back and avoided direct inspection, not wanting the situation to develop further or draw attention. Wanting to move the interaction away from the immediate area, she quickly suggested that they should step outside to talk instead. Her tone made it clear that she preferred distance, and although the reason she gave was vague, it successfully shifted the focus away from the curtain behind her. Inside the room, Woo Jin had heard parts of the exchange. From the tone, timing, and Chanmi's reaction, he was able to piece together what she had likely realized. It became clear to him that she had chosen not to expose what she knew. Despite everything she had seen or heard, she had deliberately avoided intervening in a way that would reveal him and Boyun. A few days later, in the security office, the atmosphere between Woojin and Chanmi remained noticeably different. Ever since the incident where she had discovered him and Boyoon together, there had been an unspoken tension between them. Their usual ease was gone, replaced by silence that lingered too long and brief exchanges that felt restrained. Neither of them addressed it directly, but both were clearly aware of the shift. During a break, Woojin tried to ease the tension slightly by asking Chanmi if she wanted to have lunch, reminding her that it was break time. Chanmi remained silent for a moment, as if weighing whether to respond at all. Eventually, she spoke in a low tone, explaining that after the recent Kyungshik incident, she felt too embarrassed to go to the cafeteria. She said it in a way that made it clear she preferred to avoid attention for now, and added that Woojin should go ahead and eat without her. Woojin accepted her response without pressing further, but internally, he reflected on her situation. He understood that she was dealing with the fallout of the incident in her own way, even if she was not expressing it openly. The incident itself had already left a deep impact within the facility. Kyungshik had been caught after attempting to mix sleeping pills into the inmates' food in the disciplinary cell, along with his attempt to misuse the situation involving Boyoon. After Chanmi reported everything to the warden, he was immediately removed from his position in security. However, instead of being handed over to external authorities or completely dismissed from the prison system, he was reassigned to another department where he would not directly interact with inmates. This decision left Kyungshik in an awkward and humiliating position. Within the security division, he became someone others avoided speaking to, and his presence was treated with discomfort and distance. Woojin, observing this situation, felt that allowing him to remain within the system under such conditions was questionable. However, when he was later called into the warden's office, the reasoning behind it became clearer. The warden had acknowledged Woojin's actions directly, stating that he had done well in stopping the incident and protecting the inmates. He described Woojin as both diligent and brave, recognizing that he had acted decisively when it mattered. Woojin, maintaining his usual composure, replied that he had only done his duty as a correctional officer. The warden, however, did not let the matter rest there. He emphasized that what Woojin had done went beyond routine responsibility. He added that even as the warden of the facility, he had rarely witnessed a situation this unstable within the prison environment. Woojin reflected on what he knew of the warden's background, recalling that he had previously worked in a metropolitan prison before being transferred to the remote Chongyan women's prison following an earlier incident. From this, Woojin understood that the current posting was not accidental, but the result of past complications. It also became clearer to him why Kyungshik's case had been handled internally rather than escalated. If everything were exposed publicly, the consequences for Kyungshik would not have been limited to a demotion. He would likely have been forced into full retirement or faced even harsher penalties. That was why the warden had chosen containment over exposure, and why Chanmi had been asked to remain silent and move forward. Chanmi, however, had not accepted this decision easily. From her perspective, the situation was unacceptable and should have been formally reported to higher authorities so that proper punishment could be enforced. Under normal circumstances, she would likely have pursued that path without hesitation. But Woojin gradually understood the underlying tension in her choice. As Kyungshik had implied earlier, both he and the warden were also involved in questionable workout sessions with inmates. Chanmi was aware of this reality. If she had pushed for a full investigation into Kyungshik, it would not have stopped with him. It would likely have exposed others as well, including Woojin. That realization led Woojin to a more unsettling conclusion. He began to understand that Chanmi's silence was not simply obedience to authority or agreement with the warden's decision. Instead, it was a deliberate restraint. She had chosen not to act fully on what she knew, because doing so would place Woojin at risk as well. From Woojin's perspective, this meant that her decision to ignore what she had seen behind the curtain was not indifference. It was endurance, an intentional choice to carry the burden quietly rather than allow the situation to escalate and endanger him. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the facility, another officer named Da Kyung approached Kyungshik and informed him that someone was waiting to see him in visiting room number 3. The news surprised him, as he did not expect any visitors. Confused and curious, he followed her, trying to figure out who would come to meet him under these circumstances. When he entered the visiting room, he froze for a moment upon realizing that the person waiting for him was Junye. Her presence immediately changed the atmosphere in his mind. He recognized her as someone with strong influence within the prison system, and her appearance carried a quiet authority that made her difficult to ignore. Junye looked at him steadily and stated without hesitation that she would come directly to the point. She explained that she had grown tired of being pushed around recently and no longer intended to remain passive. Her voice was calm but firm as she told him that from now on, he would serve her. She continued by saying that he would carry out workout sessions for her whenever she demanded, just as he had done with other inmates. In return, she added, she would allow him future access to Dak-young again. The offer was presented as a clear arrangement, framed as an exchange of control and leverage rather than a request. Inside the visiting room, Dak-young stood frozen for a moment, clearly startled as she listened to Junye's words. The atmosphere in the room felt heavy, as if the air itself had become difficult to breathe. Junye, maintaining her dominant presence, spoke as though everything had already been decided. She told Kyung-shik that she would allow him to perform workout sessions with Dak-young, framing it as a reward for letting his recent mistakes slide. Dak-young immediately reacted with visible discomfort, stepping back and expressing that she was not willing to go along with such a demand. Her refusal, however, only deepened the tension in the room. She stood there, clearly embarrassed and distressed, unable to fully assert herself against the situation unfolding in front of her. Without hesitation, Junye suddenly struck Dak-young across the face. The slap echoed sharply in the room, immediately silencing any remaining hesitation. Junye's expression remained firm as she spoke coldly, reminding Dak-young that she seemed to have forgotten everything she had done for her. She brought up the incident involving Chanmi pouring soup on her, explaining that it had happened because Dak-young had previously called another man to assist her with handling Boyoon, which had escalated the situation in the shower room. She added that for the past 2 years, she had done a great deal for Dak-young within the cell, yet her efforts had been poorly repaid. Junye continued, stating that Dak-young should at least be grateful that Kyung-shik was even willing to perform the workout session with her, despite everything that had happened. She criticized her attitude further, implying that Dak-young had been careless and ungrateful. Her words were sharp and controlling, leaving little room for argument. Dak-young, holding back emotion, tried to defend herself weakly, saying that she had also done her best in her position between Junye and Chanmi. However, Junye dismissed her immediately. She told her that whether she cried or not was her own choice, but she had already made her decision by failing to perform her duties properly. Junye then presented her ultimatum in a cold tone. Either she would lose the apartment that had been arranged for her, along with consequences that would also affect her family, or she would agree to proceed with the workout session with Kyung-shik. Kyung-shik stood nearby throughout the exchange, observing silently. In his mind, he thought that Dak-young still did not understand what she was being pulled into. To him, it seemed like she was simply being pushed into another arrangement without fully realizing the implications. He considered Junye's actions calculating and controlling, though he himself appeared willing to go along with the situation without hesitation. Soon after, Kyung-shik and Dak-young were made to carry out the workout session together. The interaction between them was tense and uncomfortable, with Dak-young clearly reluctant while Kyung-shik maintained a detached attitude. After some time had passed and the session ended, Kyung-shik eventually sat down with Junye afterward. Junye spoke to him in a composed tone, telling him that there would be many other opportunities with different women inside the prison. Her words carried an undertone of manipulation, as if she were positioning him within a larger structure of control. Kyung-shik, listening to her, briefly thought that she seemed somewhat more lenient toward him than expected. He even wondered if she herself would be willing to participate in such physical sessions, though he did not voice this thought openly. Instead, he asked if there was anything he could do for her in return. Junye, noticing that the break was ending, shifted the conversation. She asked him directly whether he hated Chanmi, suggesting that he could freely direct his frustration toward her, as she too held strong resentment against Chanmi. She expressed her desire to remove Chanmi from the facility entirely, and added that, if possible, Boyoon should also be eliminated from their environment. She suggested that they could work together toward that goal. As Kyung-shik listened, his expression subtly changed. The conversation triggered a series of thoughts in his mind, and he began recalling Boyoon's words and presence. Alongside that, his frustration deepened. He then added quietly that there was another person he wanted to deal with as well, Woo-jin. His tone reflected growing resentment, as he stated that he also wanted revenge against him. In the shower room, the inmates were gathered as usual, but the atmosphere had shifted into excited chatter about Woo-jin. Many of them were talking about how handsome he was, and how he had handled the Kyung-shik incident, especially the way he had saved Boyoon during the attack. His actions had clearly spread through the facility and become a major topic among the inmates. Yoon-hae was also present among them, quietly listening. As she heard everyone praising Woo-jin, she thought to herself that his name was now everywhere. In her mind, she reflected that he had once felt like something close to her own idol, but now he seemed to have taken on an almost celebrity-like status within the prison. She felt a slight sense of distance growing, as if the dynamic between them had shifted. Still, she told herself that her time had not come yet, suggesting she believed there was still space for her place in his attention or connection. On the other side, in the security room, Chanmi was speaking with Woojin. She congratulated him on his promotion and told him that she trusted he would not repeat any of the same mistakes in the future. She added that if she were not around, he should consider himself the acting sergeant and take responsibility at that level. Woojin, slightly confused, asked her what she meant. Chanmi clarified that she simply meant he should continue doing his job properly and take on more responsibility when needed. With that, she stated that she was getting off duty. Woojin responded with a simple acknowledgement, but internally he felt uneasy. He thought that perhaps it would have been easier if she were still angry or frustrated like before. Now, it felt as though she was deliberately keeping her distance from him, avoiding personal conversation altogether. After a moment, Woojin unexpectedly asked her if she would like to go for a drink outside in a few days, when they were both off duty. Chanmi paused at his suggestion. Instead of reacting emotionally, she responded in a calm and restrained manner. She said that if he was planning to bring up what happened in the infirmary, then there was no need. According to her, it would be better if they simply forgot that day had ever happened for both their sake, as well as Boyoon's. She then added that Boyoon would be transferred to the first facility the day after tomorrow, explaining that she had kept her promise. With that, she stated firmly that it was over now. Woojin was left surprised by her words, realizing that she was trying to close that chapter completely, as if distancing herself from everything that had happened. At the first facility, Woojin walked through the corridor lost in thought. He reflected on how the prison system was mostly structured around two-person cells. In his mind, he felt some relief knowing that Boyoon was now there and safe. He also acknowledged that Chanmi had taken care of her situation on his behalf, even if it had come with emotional distance between them. At the same time, he felt a sense of guilt, thinking that he might have let things slip too far, and was unsure how to manage the growing complications involving both of them. While deep in thought, he suddenly heard voices coming from inside one of the cells. At first, he assumed someone might be talking in their sleep, so he stopped and listened briefly. However, as the sounds continued, he grew suspicious and carefully peeked inside. To his surprise, he discovered two inmates actively engaged in a workout session together. Realizing what he was witnessing, he immediately knocked on the door and ordered them to stop, reminding them that such behavior was not allowed at that time. As he looked more closely, he realized that the two inmates were twins, which caught him off guard and made him visibly surprised. For a moment, he was left speechless, thinking that the situation inside the prison was becoming increasingly unpredictable and chaotic. He shook his thoughts aside and reminded himself that, regardless of the absurdity of what he was seeing, it was still his duty to intervene. Internally, he reflected that the prison environment was becoming increasingly unstable and that even routine situations were now turning into unexpected complications. Woojin decided to step away from the situation. As he turned to leave, he muttered that he had already allowed both of the inmates to carry out their workout session, and now they should simply go to sleep and behave themselves. However, one of the inmates spoke up, saying that she had been with a man for 3 years in prison, and that no matter how much she tried to control herself, it was never easy. She added that she and her sister should be allowed to continue performing the workout sessions until their release, and even after that they would keep everything a secret. She insisted that there was no need to worry. Despite his initial hesitation, Woojin ended up agreeing in a reluctant manner and went back inside the cell. There, he proceeded to perform the workout session with both of them. After some time, once it was over, he left the cell and continued on his way without further comment. Meanwhile, in the storage room, Jisoo was alone, focusing on strengthening her finger muscles. While she was there, she suddenly received a call from Chanmi. She answered it, and Chanmi immediately asked her why she had been in the storage room for so long. Jisoo replied that she could not find what she was looking for but was still searching. She then asked if there was another task assigned to her. Chanmi responded that Boyoon needed to be transferred immediately, and that Jisoo should return afterward to her duties. She added that she herself was going to clock out. Jisoo acknowledged the instruction and ended the call. After hanging up, Chanmi stood quietly for a moment, looking visibly tired. She thought to herself that there was no one around her who truly acted according to what her heart wanted. After 8 years in the prison system, she felt she had experienced everything already. She told herself that she was not a naive or sentimental person, yet she still found herself expecting something from someone. She concluded internally that it might be better to stop holding unrealistic expectations altogether, especially when it came to Woojin. At that moment, Woojin appeared in front of her. He told her that he needed to speak with her and asked her to go outside for a moment. He added that she could get angry or even scold him if she wanted, but there was something he needed to say. Chanmi responded coldly, saying that he should consider whatever had happened as already settled, and asked him if there was anything specific he wanted to discuss. She also mentioned that it looked like it was about to rain, and that she was tired, telling him not to delay her. As she began to walk away, Woojin suddenly grabbed her hand, stopping her. The action immediately triggered her reaction, and she shouted at him that he was not allowed to touch her without permission. Her voice carried both anger and emotional distance, as if she was drawing a clear boundary. Internally, Chanmi felt something unstable rise within her. She thought that he did not even respect her feelings, and that she had already reached the point where she no longer trusted or expected anything from anyone the way she once did. Despite that, her emotions remained conflicted, and she found herself unable to fully understand or control what she was feeling in that moment. Officer Jisoo, meanwhile, was in the process of transferring Boyun to another cell. Once the transfer was complete, Boyun stepped inside the new cell and quietly thanked her. As the door closed behind her, she found herself alone in the unfamiliar space. Sitting down slowly, Boyun began to reflect on everything that had been happening around her. She thought about how she had ended up in solitary conditions again, even though she had tried to help. In her mind, Woojin came to her thoughts how he might be overworked, how he had already been placed in an uncomfortable position because of Chanmi, and how he had even been caught during the earlier incident in the infirmary. She realized that she could not clearly see how things would conclude from here. Despite the uncertainty, she found herself focusing on a strange but persistent feeling. The time she had spent with Woojin felt unexpectedly precious to her, and now that it was gone, she noticed herself missing it more than she had expected. Sitting alone, she tried to steady herself and began quietly strengthening her finger muscles again, as if trying to regain control of her body and thoughts. Outside, heavy rain was falling. Woojin and Chanmi were seated inside a car, the sound of rain filling the silence between them. After a moment, Chanmi broke the silence and asked him directly why he had called her out there. Woojin responded that he simply wanted to thank her for arranging things regarding Boyun, as he had requested earlier. Chanmi immediately dismissed his explanation, telling him not to sugarcoat things by repeating what she already knew. She then stated bluntly that she would say what he was thinking on his behalf, that he had been attracted to Boyun the moment she entered the prison, that he had been treating her differently ever since, and that Boyun had likely developed feelings in return. She concluded that this was the real reason behind everything. Woojin admitted that her interpretation was correct, but added that it was not that simple. He explained that he could not pursue a relationship with Boyun, and also pointed out that there were others as well, Yunhai, and other inmates with whom he had complicated connections. He said that he had already taken on too much responsibility for people who had gone through pain, and he did not want to cause further harm. For him, it was more about watching over them and making sure they were safe, rather than forming any personal relationship. Chanmi reacted with a sharp, sarcastic tone, mocking his explanation and saying that his love story was almost bringing tears to her eyes. She joked bitterly that both he and Boyun could practically star in a movie at this rate. Then she abruptly told him to stop the car. Woojin immediately tried to stop her, warning that it was dangerous outside due to the heavy rain and the nearby forested area. However, Chanmi ignored him and stepped out anyway. Worried, Woojin followed her and grabbed her hand to stop her from going further. At that moment, he was shocked to realize that she was crying. Before he could say anything, she suddenly slapped him across the face. Her emotions were raw and unstable as she told him that if he was not going to leave and go to Boyun, then he would stay by her side instead. She added that he could hurt her if he wanted, and there was nothing she could do to stop him anyway. Then, in a sudden shift of emotion and intensity, she told him that, in exchange, they would remain partners in their workout sessions, just like before. After a brief moment of hesitation, Woojin agreed. Under the heavy rain, standing outside the car, the two of them ultimately decided to carry out a workout session together. On the other side, Hee-young was sitting calmly while applying nail polish on Junye's feet. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost casual, until Kyung-shik entered the room with a serious expression. Without wasting time, he began sharing updates. He informed them that Boyun had been transferred to the first facility, that Woojin had received a promotion, and that earlier he had confirmed Woojin and Chanmi were using a facility car together after duty. After hearing this, Junye responded with a calm but satisfied tone, saying that her prediction had been correct. She explained her interpretation of the situation, stating that Woojin clearly had feelings for Boyun, which made the situation more complicated than it appeared. She added that Chanmi was someone who normally followed principles, but when it came to matters involving Boyun, her emotional side became unstable. Junye recalled past incidents, including the body inspection situation and the moment Chanmi had intervened when Boyun was being mistreated. She pointed out how Chanmi had even gone against the warden's instructions to relocate Boyun to a more comfortable cell, which, in her view, was suspicious behavior. Junye further analyzed that although Chanmi's actions might seem contradictory on the surface, they made sense if one assumed she had feelings for Woojin. According to her, Chanmi likely started with resentment and jealousy toward Boyun, but over time, it turned into an internal conflict where she was torn between duty and emotion, reluctantly protecting Boyun, while also fearing that Woojin might drift away from her. She concluded that both Boyun and Chanmi were now emotionally entangled with Woojin, and this dynamic was becoming increasingly interesting to her. Kyung-shik, listening to all this, felt frustrated internally. He believed Woojin was advancing too far ahead in the situation, both socially and emotionally, leaving others behind. In response, Junye gave him a direct task. She instructed him to gather concrete evidence proving that Chanmi and Woojin had a personal relationship and to report it back to her. Meanwhile, elsewhere, due to heavy rainfall, Chanmi and Woojin ended up staying at a motel. The weather had forced them to take shelter, and during that time, they once again ended up engaging in a workout session there. The next morning, both of them arrived at work together. As they entered the building, Chanmi quietly suggested that they should keep some distance while walking inside, so that no one would get the wrong impression about them. Woojin, however, stood beside her and thought to himself that it would probably look even more suspicious if two people from the same department avoided walking together deliberately. At the same time, he noticed how she looked in that moment and, despite the situation, found her expression somewhat endearing. Just as they were about to proceed further inside, Kyung-shik was watching them from a distance. Observing their behavior, he became convinced that Junye's assumption had been correct. There was indeed something going on between Woojin and Chanmi. He quickly took a picture of them and considered the evidence he had gathered. However, he felt that a single image of them getting into a car together was not strong enough. He decided that capturing proof of them inside the car during a workout session would be more convincing, and he thought the dashcam footage could serve that purpose. At that moment, Woojin suddenly remembered Eunhye's advice about the dashcam and the need to delete any recorded data. Realizing the risk, he decided he had to act immediately. He rushed toward the car to handle the situation. On the other side, Kyung-shik was trying to access the vehicle, attempting to retrieve the memory card while muttering to himself that he hoped Junye would appreciate his effort. As he continued trying to manipulate the recording, Woojin arrived and immediately confronted him. Without hesitation, Woojin grabbed him and began beating him, accusing him of continuing his habit of acting behind others' backs. He also questioned him about mentioning Junye and demanded to know what he was trying to do with the memory card. The situation escalated quickly. Eventually, Kyung-shik was taken to visit room number 3 by Woojin. As they approached, Woojin asked if this was really the correct room, while Kyung-shik silently led the way, already sensing that things were reaching a breaking point. Inside, as the door opened, both of them were taken aback. Junye was already there, wearing a bathrobe. Her presence left both Woojin and Kyung-shik visibly surprised by the situation in front of them.